Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Goku was betrayed and trapped in the time chamber with Vados and Marcarita for 1000 years. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Gilded Cage. The laughter, for a moment, felt real. It echoed across the marbled terrace of Lord Beerus's palace, a raucous, genuine sound that bounced off the impossibly tall, skeletal trees and drifted into the nebulous green sky. Goku, a half-eaten space squid skewer in one hand, slammed his other palm on the long, ornate table, his guffaw the loudest of all. "I'm telling you, Beerus, I thought for sure you were going to nap right through it," he roared, pointing the skewer at the god of destruction. "The Ginyu Force shows up again, this time with a synchronized light show, and you're drooling on the lawn." Lord Beerus, the lanky, purple cat god, took a delicate sip from a crystal goblet filled with some shimmering blue liquid. He feigned offense, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "It was a calculated strategic assessment, you dolt. I was conserving my energy. Had their little laser pageant caused so much as a single petal to fall from my prize-winning petunias, I would have erased them from all memory." Across the table, Vegeta grunted, not looking up from the meticulous way he was dissecting a roasted thigh of some beast native to a planet he'd likely conquered long ago. A pathetic display. They were a nuisance, not a threat. Kakarot could have handled them in his sleep. "Hey! I was wide awake," Goku protested, though the grin never left his face. The feast was, by any mortal standard, an event of cosmic significance. A dozen different delicacies from a dozen different worlds were spread across the table, steaming and sizzling and releasing aromas that could make a Star Eater weep. It was a celebration, ostensibly for the swift and almost comical dispatch of Frisia's resurrected, and somehow even more flamboyant, former special forces. Yet, beneath the veneer of camaraderie and gluttony, something was amiss. A single, sour note in a grand symphony. Goku, for all his perceived naivete, could feel it. He'd spent his life sensing energy, and the energy at this table was strained. It was in the way Vegeta's shoulders were coiled tight, his jaw set as if bracing for a blow. It was in the way Gohan, seated beside Piccolo, pushed his food around his plate, his brow furrowed in a look of deep, troubled thought that had nothing to do with the academic papers he usually fretted over. Piccolo was a statue, his white cape a stark splash against the vibrant chaos of the palace grounds. His eyes, fixed on the distant, swirling cosmos, were darker than usual. Even Beerus was off. The god's usual bored arrogance was replaced by a brittle, almost manic joviality. He laughed too loudly, ate too quickly, and kept shooting furtive glances at his attendant, Whis. Whis, ever the picture of placid grace, stood near the head of the table, his staff held loosely in one hand. His smile was serene, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He watched the scene with the detached air of a botanist observing a peculiar, and perhaps dangerous, new species of plant. And then there were the other two. Vados, Whis's elder sister and the Angel of Universe 6, stood beside him. She was a mirror of her brother's poise, but her expression held a trace of wry amusement, as if she were privately critiquing the entire affair. Next to her was Marcarita, the Angel of Universe 11. Her signature twin ponytails bounced slightly as she tilted her head, her gaze analytical. They had arrived with Whis, their presence explained as a casual visit, a rare chance for the angelic siblings to compare notes on their respective destroyers. It made sense, on the surface. But their combined presence added another layer of weight to the already heavy atmosphere. "More of the gratin, Lord Beerus?" Whis asked, his voice a smooth, calming melody that cut through the chatter. He gestured, and a steaming silver dish floated from the center of the table to Beerus's plate. "Don't mind if I do," Beerus mumbled, scooping a large portion onto his plate. He avoided looking at Goku. Goku took another massive bite of his skewer, chewing thoughtfully. He swallowed, the last of his boisterous mood fading. He looked at Gohan. "You okay, son? You've barely touched your food. Worried about Pan? Gohan flinched, as if struck. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting his father's. There was a flicker of something in them, guilt, pain, a desperate plea, and it was gone in an instant, replaced by a forced smile. No, Dad. She's fine. Vidal's with her. Just, a lot on my mind. Work. It was a weak lie. Goku knew it. He could feel the lie, a discordant little flutter in his son's energy. He looked from Gohan to Piccolo, who met his gaze for a fraction of a second before turning away. Then to Vegeta, who pointedly refused to look at him at all. What was going on? It felt like the calm before a storm, but there were no storm clouds in sight. Only the smiling faces of his friends and family. Whis clapped his hands together, a sound that was both gentle and commanding, silencing all conversation. Every head turned towards him. Now that everyone is sufficiently satiated, he began, his eyes twinkling, I had a thought. A proposal, if you will. A unique opportunity. Goku's interest was immediately piqued. The strange tension was momentarily forgotten, replaced by the familiar thrill of a new challenge. A proposal? What is it, Whis? A new training regimen? A monster that eats planets for breakfast? Whis chuckled. Something far more instructive, Goku. A true test of your limits. As you know, your power has grown to a point where it is difficult to accurately measure. Your battles create shockwaves that ripple through the fabric of reality itself. It is a source of concern. Beerus grunted in agreement. He's a walking catastrophe. One wrong sneeze and he could accidentally vaporize a galaxy. My point exactly, Whis continued smoothly. Sparring here, or even on a deserted world, always requires you to hold back, lest you cause irreparable damage. But what if there was a place where you could unleash everything? Every last drop of your power, with no consequences to the outside world? Goku's eyes widened. He knew exactly what Whis was talking about. The hyperbolic time chamber. Precisely, Whis confirmed. But with a twist. He gestured to his sister and her counterpart. My esteemed colleagues, Vados and Marcarita, have graciously agreed to participate. Not as combatants, of course, but as divine observers. Their senses operate on a different spectrum than my own. They can analyze the very nature of your energy, its stability, its purity, its potential for both creation and destruction, in a way that even I cannot, unburdened as they are by our teacher-student relationship. Vados offered a small, polite smile. My brother has a tendency toward favoritism. An impartial perspective is always beneficial. Marcarita chimed in, her tone crisp and professional. The data on a mortal achieving such levels of divine energy is unprecedented. It would be a fascinating study. Goku was practically vibrating with excitement. A no-holds-barred fight, analyzed by 3 angels. It was the greatest training opportunity he could ever imagine. The uneasiness he'd felt was a distant memory, burned away by the fire of his Saiyan blood. Who am I fighting? Goku asked, his fists already clenching in anticipation. Vegeta? A magical clone of myself? Don't say it's you, Whis, you'll just dodge everything for a year. Not me, Whis said. And not Vegeta. Your opponent will be Lord Beerus. A hush fell over the table. Goku looked at Beerus, whose ears twitched. The god of destruction was trying to look nonchalant, but Goku saw the flicker of anticipation in his golden eyes. A real fight. No holding back. The kind of fight they'd both been craving since their first battle. Lord Beerus has agreed that this is a necessary diagnostic, Whis explained. To see just how far the gap between mortal and god has truly closed. Or widened. Beerus stood, stretching his lanky limbs like a cat preparing to pounce. Don't get any ideas, Goku. It's just a checkup. And I expect you to provide a decent warm-up before I get bored. You got it. Goku beamed, his spirit soaring. This was it. This explained everything. They were all just nervous about him and Beerus really letting loose. The tension, the weird looks, it was all just pre-fight jitters. He felt a wave of relief wash over him. Of course. His friends weren't acting strange because they were mad at him, they were just worried. Well, what are we waiting for? Goku said, already rising from his seat. Let's go. The walk from the terrace to the clearing where the time chamber door would be placed was quiet. Whis had summoned it from the lookout on Earth, its simple, white, pagoda-like structure appearing in a shimmer of light. It looked small and unassuming against the backdrop of Beerus's colossal, alien world. Goku walked at the front of the group, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. Whis, Vados, and Marcarita glided beside him. Behind them, Beerus followed, with Vegeta, Gohan, and Piccolo trailing a few paces further back. Their silence was a heavy blanket. Goku glanced over his shoulder. You guys coming to watch? Vegeta grunted, stuffing his hands in his pockets. Someone has to make sure you don't get erased completely, Kakarot. The usual venom was in his words, but it felt hollow, rehearsed. Gohan just nodded, his face pale. We'll be here, Dad. They reached the door. It stood there, plain and white, the gateway to a dimension of infinite nothingness and distorted time. A place of intense, isolated training. Whis turned to face Goku. The conditions are simple. You, Vados, and Marcarita will enter. Lord Beerus will follow immediately after. Once inside, the battle begins. You will remain inside for 3 hours of our time, which, as you know, is approximately 3 months for you. Ample time for a thorough evaluation. Do you understand? Crystal clear, Goku said, rolling his shoulders. He grinned at the 2 angels beside him. You two ready for the light show? Vados's expression was unreadable. We are prepared for any eventuality, son Goku. Marcarita simply nodded, her gaze fixed on the door as if it were a complex equation she was solving. Goku gave a thumbs up to the group behind him. He saw Bulma had joined them now, standing beside Vegeta, her arms crossed, a worried frown on her face. He gave her a reassuring wink, but she didn't smile back. Strange. He shrugged it off. No time for that now. He turned to the door, his heart pounding a familiar battle rhythm. He placed a hand on the cool, smooth surface. It felt like any other door, but he knew what lay beyond. An eternity of white. A world without limits. See you on the other side, he said, and pushed it open. The familiar, blinding white void greeted him. It was a sensory deprivation chamber the size of a universe. There was no ground, no sky, only an endless expanse of luminous nothing. The air was still and temperature neutral. He stepped inside, his boots making no sound. Vados and Marcarita followed, their movements silent and graceful, their angelic presence a stark contrast to the utter emptiness of the dimension. They floated a few feet away from him, their staffs held at their sides. Goku turned back, a wide grin on his face, ready to welcome Beerus into the arena. Alright, Beerus, I'm ready when you. The door slammed shut. The sound was not a simple click or a thud. It was a boom of absolute finality, a cannon shot of metaphysical severance that echoed through the infinite void. The light from the outside world was snuffed out in an instant. The only illumination now was the soft, ambient glow of the dimension itself. Goku stared at the door, his grin frozen on his face. For a second, he was just confused. Huh? Did the wind catch it? He reached for the doorknob. It was gone. The entire frame where the knob should have been was now a smooth, seamless surface. Then, the light started. Golden energy, brilliant and terrifyingly potent, erupted across the door's surface. It began as a single thread, then spiderwebbed outwards, weaving an intricate, impossible pattern of divine symbols and celestial runes. The air crackled, the pressure in the void skyrocketing. Goku stumbled back, his battle instincts screaming. This wasn't part of any training. This was a seal. A prison. And he felt the energy signatures powering it. His breath hitched. His heart, which had been pounding with excitement, now felt like a block of ice in his chest. The first signature was obvious, a chaotic, purple inferno of destructive power. Beerus. The second was calm, vast, and complex, a river of divine energy he knew as well as his own. Whis. But it was the others that broke him. He felt the fierce, burning pride of a scion prince, a familiar, lifelong rival. Vegeta. He felt the calm, disciplined, and wise energy of his first true mentor, the Namekian who was a part of his soul. Piccolo. And then, the one that shattered his world. A gentle, powerful, yet conflicted Ki. A power born of his own blood, tempered with kindness and fierce intelligence. Gohan. His son. They were all there. Outside the door. Pouring their power into this divine cage. No, the word was a choked whisper. His mind refused to process it. It was a mistake. A trick. It had to be. He rushed to the door, slamming his fists against the glowing, golden prison. Guys! What's going on? This isn't funny. Open the door. His voice was swallowed by the white void, unheard by anyone beyond the seal. Vegeta. Gohan. Open this door right now, he screamed, his voice cracking with a dawning, horrifying panic. He could feel their ki, steady and resolved. They weren't stopping. They were holding it. They were trapping him. Why? He whispered to the unfeeling metal. He looked over his shoulder at Vados and Marcarita. Their professional detachment was gone, replaced by expressions of pure, unadulterated shock. Did you know about this? Goku's voice was low, trembling with a power that had nothing to do with combat. Vados shook her head slowly, her eyes wide. No. We were told, this was an evaluation. My brother, he lied. Marcarita's gaze was fixed on the seal, her analytical mind working furiously. This is no ordinary enchantment. It's a fusion of angelic law and the power of multiple gods of destruction, anchored by mortal ki. It's designed to be absolute. It's feeding on the ambient energy of this dimension. Goku's confusion and panic began to curdle, solidifying into a new, terrible emotion. A white-hot, volcanic rage that started in the pit of his stomach and roared upwards. Betrayal. It was a feeling more painful than any physical blow he had ever endured. Frisia's cruelty, Cell's arrogance, Buu's madness, they were nothing compared to this. This was his family. His friends. His son. They had looked him in the eye, smiled at him, and led him into a cage. Greaawaa. The scream was not human. It was the sound of a universe being torn apart. A wave of raw power exploded from him, and the white void of the time chamber flickered, the infinite space groaning under the strain. He was instantly Super Saiyan, his golden aura a raging inferno against the stark white. He drew his fist back and punched the door. The impact was cataclysmic. A shockwave erupted from the point of contact, distorting the very fabric of the dimension. But the door didn't even vibrate. The golden seal flared, and Goku felt a horrifying sensation. His own power was being siphoned off, drawn into the glowing runes, which pulsed and burned even brighter. The seal was using his own strength against him. They planned for this, Marcarita said, her voice laced with a dawning horror. They knew you would do this. The seal is designed to absorb and reinforce itself with any energy directed at it. Goku didn't listen. He couldn't. The pain was too great, the rage too absolute. He was a cornered animal, and the only thing he knew was to fight. "You think this can hold me?" he bellowed, his voice distorted by the sheer power coursing through him. His aura exploded again, shifting from gold to a shimmering, divine blue. The pressure intensified 100-fold. The ambient light of the chamber dimmed as his energy consumed it, his super scion blue form a raging blue star in the oppressive emptiness. He planted his feet in the non-existent air and unleashed a barrage of punches, each one powerful enough to shatter a planet into dust. They rained down on the sealed door, a percussive roar that was the only sound in the universe. Boom. 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 With every impact, the seal flared brighter. It drank his divine energy like a thirsty man in a desert. It grew stronger, the golden light becoming so intense it was painful to look at. "It's not working, Son Goku." Vados called out, her voice sharp, trying to cut through his haze of fury. "You are only making it stronger." He ignored her. The faces of his friends flashed in his mind. Vegeta's smirk. Piccolo's nod. Gohan's pained smile. Lies. All of it. Kamehame. He drew his hands to his side, the blue light of his ultimate attack gathering between his palms. The energy condensed, swirling into a sphere of unimaginable power. The entire dimension of the time chamber trembled, threatening to collapse not from his power, but from the seal's reaction to it. "Don't!" Marcarita shouted, for the first time losing her angelic composure. "You'll make the seal permanent." "Ha-ia!" He thrust his hands forward, and a colossal, brilliant blue beam of energy erupted from his palms. It was a torrent of divine ki, a river of destruction aimed at the single point of his agony. It slammed into the door, and for a moment, the entire world was blue light and screaming sound. The seal did not break. It did not crack. It rejoiced. The golden runes blazed, absorbing the Kamehameha wave in its entirety. They pulsed with a triumphant, blinding light, the symbols burning themselves deeper into the fabric of the door, into the fabric of reality itself. The hum of power became a steady, unassailable drone. The prison was complete. It was absolute. It was eternal. The blue light of Goku's attack faded. His aura sputtered. The sheer, hopeless futility of the act crashed down on him. He had just used his ultimate weapon to reinforce the bars of his own cage. His blue hair flickered back to black. The divine aura vanished. The overwhelming power that had shaken the dimension receded, leaving a profound and terrifying silence in its wake. He floated there, his arms outstretched, his body trembling not from exertion, but from a grief so profound it stole the air from his lungs. The strength drained from his limbs. His knees buckled. He fell, landing with a soft, soundless impact on the non-existent floor. He stayed on his knees, his head bowed, his fists clenched on the white ground. His shoulders shook. A single, ragged sob escaped his lips. Then another. He had faced down tyrants, monsters, and gods. He had died and come back to life. He had shaken the multiverse with his power. But this was an injury to the soul. And it was a wound from which he did not know if he could ever recover. The rage was gone, burned out and replaced by an ocean of cold, desolate despair. He was alone. Trapped. Betrayed by everyone he had ever loved. In the infinite, silent, white expanse of the hyperbolic time chamber, Son Goku, the hero of Universe 7, knelt and wept, a prisoner in a gilded cage he had helped to build, with only the two shocked, silent angels as witnesses to his utter devastation. Chapter 2, The Crucible of Eternity. The silence that followed the storm of his rage was more profound than the void itself. Goku remained on his knees, a broken effigy in the center of infinity. The echoes of his own power, now woven into the golden tracery of his prison, hummed with a mocking permanence. The strength that had once threatened gods now served only to reinforce the walls of his despair. Vados and Marcarita floated a respectful distance away, their angelic composure a fragile mask over their shared shock. They were trapped. Not by a malfunction or a cosmic accident, but by a deliberate, intricate act of betrayal orchestrated by their own kin and the very mortals they were tasked to observe. Their existence, once a seamless flow of millennia, now had a definitive, terrifying boundary: this door, this seal, this man. For days, or weeks, time had already lost its meaning here. Goku did not move. He did not speak. He did not eat the exquisite meals they conjured out of habit, dishes that would sit steaming in the white void for a moment before they were willed away, untouched. He was a statue of grief, his energy signature a dim, flickering candle where a supernova had once burned. The first year was a silent testament to his pain. He would rise, his movements stiff and devoid of their usual fluid grace, and walk to the door. He would place his palms flat against the cold, sealed surface and stand there for hours, as if trying to feel the lingering presence of those who had put him here. He wasn't trying to break it anymore. He was communing with his own wound. Then, the rage would return, not as a cleansing fire, but as a sour, toxic tide. He would practice his forms, his movements filled with a brutal, graceless efficiency. The void would shudder with the force of his phantom blows, each strike aimed at a face he could see in his mind's eye: Beerus's condescending smirk, Vegeta's proud glare, Gohan's tear-filled, resolute eyes. He fought ghosts, and every day, the ghosts won. Vados and Marcarita watched. They were wardens of a single, self-flagellating prisoner. "He is going to destroy himself," Marcarita stated, her voice a flat, clinical observation. It was the 219th rotation since their imprisonment began, a rotation they marked by the slow, imperceptible dimming and brightening of the void's ambient light, a rhythm only their senses could detect. "Perhaps," Vados replied, her arms crossed within her sleeves. "Or perhaps this is what the breaking of a soul looks like. We are taught of creation and destruction, of the laws of energy and matter. We are not taught the mathematics of a broken heart." "It is inefficient," Marcarita countered, though without her usual conviction. "His potential is immense. To see it squandered in this repetitive cycle of grief is a cosmic waste." "Then perhaps you should tell him that," Vados suggested, a subtle challenge in her tone. Marcarita looked at Goku. He was standing motionless again, his back to them, a silhouette of loss against the endless white. She glided forward, her movement soundless. "Son Goku," she began, her voice crisp. "This course of action is illogical. Your anger only serves to deplete your reserves and cause you further psychological distress. You must." Goku turned his head, his eyes fixing on her. They were hollow, empty pools of black fire. The cheerfulness, the warmth, the very light that had defined him was gone, replaced by something ancient and cold. The look he gave her was not one of anger, but of utter, dismissive apathy. He didn't say a word. He simply turned back to the door. The dismissal was more effective than any shout. It was a clear, silent message: you are not a part of this. You cannot understand. Marcarita halted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. She, an angel who had counseled gods and witnessed the birth of galaxies, had been rendered irrelevant by a mortal's grief. She glided back to Vados's side, a newfound silence between them. They had time. They had nothing but time. The first century passed in this rhythm of silent grief and explosive, futile rage. Goku's body grew harder, leaner, his movements more economical. His power, even when dormant, coiled beneath his skin like a serpent. But his spirit was eroding. The sparring they attempted was pointless. He fought not to learn, but to hurt. He would come at them with the full, unrestrained fury of a Super Saiyan Blue, and they would deflect him with a single finger, a slight shift of their staff, their expressions unreadable. He wasn't an opponent, he was a force of nature, as predictable and mindless as a hurricane. And just as easily guided into harmlessness. The end of the first 100 years was marked not by a celebration, but by a final, desperate act. Goku floated in the center of the vast chamber, his eyes closed. He raised his hands to the non-existent sky, and for the first time in a century, he spoke, his voice a raw, grating whisper. Everyone. Everything. Lend me your energy. Vados and Marcarita watched, stunned, as a faint, shimmering blue light began to gather above him. He was trying to form a spirit bomb. Here. In a dimension defined by its emptiness. He was calling out to a life that could not hear him, begging for strength from a universe that was sealed away. He was scraping together the residual ambient energy of the dimension, the faint echoes of his own power, the very life force of the three of them. It was the most pathetic, and the most heartbreaking, thing they had ever witnessed. The sphere that formed was a pale, trembling thing, no larger than his fist. It held not the hope of the universe, but the concentrated essence of his own despair. He looked at it, then at the door, and with a final, guttural scream, he hurled it. The tiny ball of sorrow drifted slowly through the void and touched the seal. It didn't explode. It was simply absorbed. A single drop of rain falling into the ocean. The golden runes flickered once, almost contentedly, and then settled. That was the moment the rage finally died. Goku stared at the door, at the spot where his last hope had vanished. The fire in his eyes went out, leaving only cold, dead embers. He lowered his arms. His shoulders, which had been tensed for 100 years, finally slumped. He collapsed, not with a cry, but with a quiet, final sigh of defeat. He curled into a ball on the white floor, and for the next decade, he barely moved. The storm had passed, leaving behind a desolate, empty landscape. It was Vados who finally approached him. She did not offer food or platitudes. She stood over his motionless form, her shadow the only feature in the white expanse. "The silence is loud, isn't it?" she said, her voice soft. Goku didn't respond, but his fingers twitched. "You have spent a century screaming at a door that cannot hear," she continued. "You have exhausted your rage. You have exhausted your sorrow. And now you have found the truth of this place. It is not a prison of walls and bars. It is a prison of emptiness. And it has finally hollowed you out to match." She knelt, her blue skin a cool contrast to the stark white. She was closer to him than she had been in over 100 years. "Look at me, son Goku." Slowly, reluctantly, he turned his head. His eyes were lifeless. "Your power is a storm without direction," she said, her voice firm, cutting through the haze of his despair. "It is a hurricane in a bottle, crashing against the glass, desperate for a world to ravage. You think your strength is your greatest asset. It is not. It is a wild, untamed beast, and right now, it is devouring you from the inside out. Let us teach you to be the storm's master." For the first time in 110 years, a flicker of something other than pain appeared in Goku's eyes. A spark of confusion. Of curiosity. "Teach me." His voice was a dry rasp. "Teach me what?" "How to be a better prisoner." "We will teach you what my brother only ever touched upon." Marcarita's voice joined them, as she glided to Vados's other side, forming a triangle around him. "Whis taught you to be a stronger fighter. We will teach you to understand the nature of the power you wield. Why it exists. What it means. Control, son Goku. Not the brute force control of holding back, but the intricate, absolute control of a creator shaping his universe. We have an eternity here. You can either spend it as a ghost, haunting the memory of your own betrayal, or you can spend it becoming a god. A god. The word hung in the air. He had wielded the power of gods, fought them, befriended them, been betrayed by them. But to become one? He looked at the door, the golden symbol of his failure. He had tried strength. He had tried rage. He had tried hope. All of it had been useless. He was empty. A blank slate. He had nothing left to lose. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself into a sitting position. He looked at the two angels, at their patient, ancient eyes. He saw no pity in them. He saw an offer. A purpose. How? He asked, the single word a surrender and a plea. Vados smiled, a true, genuine smile. We begin with the hardest lesson for a creature of action like you. We begin with stillness. The next 50 years were the most difficult of Goku's entire existence. More difficult than fighting Frieza, more grueling than mastering Super Saiyan 3. His first lesson was meditation. They had him sit, cross-legged, in the center of the void. Close your eyes, Vados instructed. Breathe. And simply, be. It was torture. The moment his eyes closed, the faces returned. Gohan, turning away. Vegeta, powering the seal. Whis, his placid, treacherous smile. The rage, which he thought was gone, simmered again. His muscles tensed. His energy flared. No, Marcarita's voice cut in, sharp as glass. Do not fight the thoughts. Observe them. They are clouds in your sky. They are not the sky itself. You are the sky. Acknowledge them, and let them pass. Let them pass. They were burned into his soul. But he tried. He sat for days, for weeks, for months. He fought the urge to jump up, to scream, to punch something. He fought the tremors of his own heart. He followed their guidance, focusing on the simple, physical sensation of his own breathing, the only anchor in a sea of mental torment. Slowly, glacially, something shifted. He began to see the thoughts not as a part of him, but as intruders. He could feel the anger rising, and instead of being consumed by it, he could say to himself, there is the anger. He could feel the sorrow welling up, and he could think, there is the grief. It was a tiny separation, a hairline crack between himself and his pain, but it was the most significant victory he had ever won. After 50 years of stillness, he could sit for a full rotation without moving, his mind a calm, deep lake. The pain was still there, a stone at the bottom of the lake, but the waters were no longer turbulent. Then, the true training began. Your ki is a clumsy hammer, Marcarita said, holding up her hand. A perfect, shimmering sphere of white light appeared in her palm. It was flawless, impossibly dense, yet it radiated no heat, no pressure. You use it to smash. You must learn to use it as a needle and thread. They started with the basics. He had to create a sphere of energy just like hers. His first attempts were pathetic. His sphere was lopsided, unstable, leaking power in every direction. It would pulse and flare before sputtering out. You are trying to force it into shape, Vados explained patiently. You must persuade it. Feel the energy. It has a nature, a will. Guide it. Do not command it. For decades, he practiced. He spent 20 years just learning to form a perfect, stable sphere. Then they made him move it. To make it dance and weave through the air without losing its integrity. Then they made him create 2. Then 10. Then 1,000. He spent an entire decade learning to control 1,000 tiny, marble-sized spheres of ki simultaneously, making them form complex geometric patterns, galaxies in miniature, all held in place by his will alone. His raw power was irrelevant here. This was about focus. Finesse. Control. During this time, the nature of their relationship began to change. The long hours of training bled into long hours of conversation. The silence of the first century was replaced by a constant dialogue. They were no longer just wardens and a prisoner. They were a teacher and his students, and sometimes, the roles would reverse. One night, as they rested from a grueling session of ki manipulation, Goku found himself staring at his hands. I still don't understand why, he said quietly, the word surprising even himself. Gohan, he's my son. I would have done anything for him. How could he? Vados and Marcarita were silent for a moment. It was the first time he had spoken of them by name in 200 years. Fear is a powerful motivator, Goku, Vados said gently. Perhaps more powerful than love. They saw you as a singularity. A focal point for chaos. Every enemy you defeated was replaced by a stronger one. Frisia. The androids. Cell. Bu. Me. Zamasu. Jiren. To them, the pattern must have seemed terrifyingly clear. You were an invitation to ever greater threats. So they got rid of the invitation, Goku finished, his voice flat. He understood the logic. It was the cold, emotional reality of it that still felt like a physical blow. It was a cruel and misguided act, Marcarita added, her tone carrying a surprising amount of venom. One born of desperation. My brother, all angels, we are bound by laws. We are not to interfere. But Whis did. He chose a side. He chose fear over faith. And in doing so, he betrayed not only you, but the very principles he was meant to embody. Goku looked at her, and then at Vados. In their eyes, he saw a reflection of his own confinement. You're prisoners too, aren't you? Vados blinked, taken aback. We are angels. We serve. Is there a difference? Goku asked. You have to watch over your destroyers. You have to follow the Grand Priest's laws. You can't interfere. You have all this power, but you're not free to use it. You're just in a much bigger cage. The truth of his words hung in the air between them. They had never considered their existence in such blunt terms. They were eternal, powerful, revered, but they were not free. Their lives were a service, a duty, a gilded cage of their own. In that moment of shared understanding, the last walls between them crumbled. He was not just a mortal. They were not just angels. They were three beings, trapped by circumstances beyond their control, finding solace in each other's company. The training intensified, but it became a collaboration. They sparred, and it was no longer a one-sided lesson. Goku, with his newfound control, began to anticipate their movements. He couldn't match their speed or the effortless perfection of angelic ultra instinct, but he could use his own instincts, the wild, unpredictable nature of his Scion heritage, to create openings they didn't expect. He learned to weave his instant transmission into his movements, not just to travel, but to create spatial distortions, to be in three places at once, his attacks coming from angles that defied geometry. The romance, when it came, was as natural and inevitable as a sunrise. It wasn't born of passion or lust, but of a deeper intimacy. It was in a shared look across the void after a perfectly executed training maneuver. It was in Marcarita's small, rare smile when Goku finally mastered a technique that had vexed him for a decade. It was in Vados' hand resting on his shoulder, not as a teacher, but as a partner, as they discussed the philosophical nature of creation. They had been stripped of everything and had found everything in each other. They were a trinity, a single unit forged in the crucible of forever. Their love was a quiet, steady flame in the heart of eternity, a warmth against the cold of their betrayal. The 400th year marked the beginning of his final transformation. He had mastered their techniques. He had integrated them with his own. But he was still using mortal forms powered by divine energy. Super Saiyan Blue was a state of overwhelming output. It was a roaring fire. What he needed was a furnace. The final step is to unify, not to layer, Vados explained, as the three of them floated in a meditative circle. Your Saiyan forms are explosions of emotion. Rage. Pride. Desperation. They are powerful, but they are impure. Angelic power is born of serenity. Of a complete absence of internal conflict. You cannot be a calm sea and a raging storm at the same time. So I have to stop being a Saiyan? Goku asked, the thought unsettling. No, Marcarita corrected. You must become the ultimate Saiyan. One whose drive is not born of a need to fight, but from a state of perfect will. You must take the fire of your spirit and contain it. Let it burn not as a wildfire, but as the heart of a star. Contained. Absolute. Serene. For the next 600 years, this was his goal. He meditated on the very core of his being. He journeyed inward, past the layers of his power, past the scars of his betrayal. He confronted the primal rage of the great ape, the pride of the Super Saiyan, the fierce, burning love for the family he had lost. He did not suppress them. He did not destroy them. He accepted them. He integrated them. He took all the chaotic, emotional energy that defined Son Goku and folded it into the calm, endless sea of his meditative mind. The change was gradual. His presence, once loud and crackling, became quiet and immense. His power no longer leaked from him. It was a deep, silent ocean within him. He learned to use the energy of creation, not just destruction, conjuring intricate sculptures of light and sound, painting masterpieces on the canvas of the void. He learned to feel the subtle laws of the dimension, the flow of its distorted time. Their bond deepened into something that had no name in any mortal tongue. They were lovers, partners, a family of three souls intertwined. They moved as one, thought as one, fought as one. Sparring sessions became a beautiful, terrifying dance. Goku, Vados, and Marcarita, moving in perfect synchronicity, a whirlwind of fists and feet and energy that bent the laws of space and time. The 1000th year was approaching. They had long since stopped counting. Their life was simply this. A state of shared existence, training, and quiet love in the heart of their white world. The breakthrough came during a moment of perfect stillness. The three of them were sitting together, not even meditating, just enjoying the shared silence that was now a comfort, not a torment. Goku was watching Vados and Marcarita as they mentally played a game of celestial chess, moving constellations in their minds. A feeling of profound, unconditional love for them washed over him, a love that was pure and absolute, untainted by want or need. In that moment, everything clicked. The fire of the Scion and the stillness of the angel. The drive to protect and the serenity of acceptance. The love he felt now, and the pain he had overcome. It all collapsed inward. There was no explosion. No roar. No brilliant flash of light. There was only a quiet implosion. Goku's already immense energy signature vanished. For a terrifying second, Vados and Marcarita thought he had ceased to exist. They whipped their heads around to look at him, their eyes wide with alarm. He was still there, sitting cross-legged, his eyes closed. But he was different. The very concept of him had changed. His black hair began to shift, not in color, but in substance, seeming to absorb the light around it, each strand a sliver of midnight. His muscles relaxed, yet he radiated a power that was infinitely denser than anything he had ever shown before. His aura was gone, pulled entirely within himself. He opened his eyes. The pupils were the same familiar, gentle black. But his irises, once black, now glowed with the soft, internal light of a white dwarf star, laced with swirling nebulas of silver. They were eyes that had witnessed the passage of 1,000 years and had found peace at the end of it. This was not a transformation of rage or need. It was a transformation of being. The zenith form. A state of perfect energy control, perfect spiritual harmony. He had become the master of the storm. He looked at Vados and Marcarita, and a small, serene smile touched his lips. It was his old smile, but deeper, wiser, carrying the weight of a millennium. "Hello," he said, his voice the same, yet resonating with a quiet authority that could command gods. They stared, speechless, at the being their love and guidance had helped create. A mortal who had transcended mortality. A warrior who had found enlightenment. A man who had entered this cage broken and was now, complete. It was in that moment of quiet triumph, as Vados and Marcarita moved to embrace him, their hearts swelling with a love and pride that transcended their angelic nature, that they heard it. A sound. It was not a sound they created. It was not a sound from within their minds. It was an external, physical noise. The first they had heard in 1,000 years. Ping. It was a tiny, high-pitched note, like a single grain of sand striking a crystal bell. All three of them froze, their heads snapping towards the door. There, on the impossibly smooth, golden-sealed surface, a flaw had appeared. A hairline crack, no longer than a fingernail, had formed near the center of the complex runes. It was almost invisible, a faint, dark line against the brilliant gold. But to their senses, which could perceive the whispers of dying stars and the rustle of time itself, it was a cataclysm. A deafening roar that announced the impossible. The seal. The absolute, eternal prison that had defined their existence for 1,000 years, was breaking. 1 year had passed in the world outside. Their long wait was almost over. Chapter 3, The Unforgiven. The crack was a promise and a threat. For a day, or a week, the flow of time was a river rushing toward a waterfall now, its pace frantic and unsteady. The three of them simply watched it. It was an object of intense fascination. The crack did not grow. It did not spread. It was a static, perfect flaw in a perfect prison, a whisper of the world outside. Goku, now perpetually in his zenith state, a form as natural to him as breathing, sat before the door. The starlight in his eyes swirled as he studied the intricate golden runes, no longer seeing them as a symbol of his pain, but as a complex piece of engineering. "It's not just decaying," he said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to carry across the entire void. "The external power source is becoming unstable." Marcarita glided to his side, her own analytical gaze tracing the energy flows. "He's right. The mortal anchors, their key signatures are fluctuating. Wavering. It's like a dozen different hands trying to hold a single, impossibly heavy rope. After a year, their focus is slipping." "Guilt is a heavy burden," Vados added softly, looking at Goku. "Perhaps the heaviest of all." Goku's expression was serene. He felt the distant, chaotic thrum of their energies, Vegeta's simmering pride, Gohan's anxious grief, Piccolo's stoic regret. 1,000 years ago, the sensation would have stoked his rage. Now, it was just data. The emotional storm had passed long ago, leaving behind only a calm, quiet clarity. He felt a profound sense of pity for them, for the prison of guilt they had built for themselves. He raised a hand, his palm facing the door. He didn't touch it. He simply let his own energy, now a perfectly controlled, silent river, flow from his palm. He wasn't attacking the seal. He was listening to it, feeling its resonant frequency, the way a safecracker listens to the tumblers of a lock. The golden runes of the seal, which had once greedily drunk his power, now recoiled from his touch. His energy was no longer the chaotic, emotional fuel it was designed to absorb. It was something else, something alien to its design. It was pure, focused will, and the seal had no defense against it. The fundamental law used to create this seal was based on the principle of divine energy overpowering and containing mortal energy, Goku explained, his eyes closed. But it was anchored by mortals who felt superior, justified. That moral certainty gave the anchor its strength. "And now?" Vados asked, intrigued. "Now, they doubt," Goku said. "Their certainty is gone. Their power is a discordant mess. And the seal, it has a flaw. A resonant frequency. It was built to contain a hurricane, not a perfectly tuned note." He flexed his fingers, and a single, impossibly fine needle of his zenith energy, thinner than a human hair, shot from his fingertip. It struck the crack not with force, but with a precise, vibrating frequency. The high-pitched ping returned, 100 times louder. The single crack branched, a web of darkness spreading across the golden door. The steady hum of the seal faltered, turning into a discordant, grinding shriek. The light of the runes began to flicker erratically. The entire door shuddered. Goku stood, turning his back on the failing prison. He looked at Vados and Marcarita, a soft smile on his face. "It's time." He didn't need to say more. 1,000 years of shared existence had made them a single, cohesive unit. They moved to his side, Vados on his right, Marcarita on his left. He reached out, and they each took one of his hands. Their bond, forged in eternity, was their true strength. Behind them, the shrieking of the seal reached a crescendo. The golden light of the runes flared one last, desperate time, then shattered into a billion motes of dying light. The door itself, now just a plain white slab, began to dissolve, crumbling into fine white dust that was scattered by a wind that didn't exist. For the first time in a millennium, they saw something other than white. A patch of brilliant green grass. A skeletal, alien tree. A sky the color of emeralds. The air that rushed in was thick with scents and sensations. The smell of damp earth, the sweet perfume of alien flowers, the gentle caress of a warm breeze. It was an overwhelming sensory flood, and for a moment, the three of them simply stood there, letting the reality of the outside world wash over them. Then they stepped through. The world outside was just as they had left it. The hyperbolic time chamber had vanished, its doorway now just an empty space on the lawn of Beerus's palace. The long, ornate table was still there, the remnants of the feast uncleared, a testament to a celebration that had ended a year ago. And they were all there. Whis stood foremost, his usual placid smile gone, replaced by a look of profound, stunned disbelief. His staff was held tight in his hand, as if it were the only thing holding him upright. Behind him, Lord Beerus was a picture of divine shock, his purple fur standing on end, his golden eyes wider than Goku had ever seen them. And behind the gods stood the architects of his imprisonment. Vegeta, his arms crossed, his face a mask of defiant pride that couldn't quite hide the tremor of fear in his jaw. Piccolo, his expression grim, his body tensed for a fight he knew he couldn't win. And Gohan. Gohan looked like he had aged a decade in the last year. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights, and as he looked at his father, his expression crumbled into one of raw, unadulterated horror. Bulma stood beside Vegeta, her hand over her mouth, her scientific mind unable to process the being that stood before her. They had expected a monster. A screaming, raging beast consumed by 1,000 years of hatred. They had prepared for an apocalypse. They were met with silence. Goku, flanked by the two angels, simply stood there, his presence a quiet void in the universe. He was not radiating power, he was absorbing the light, a figure of calm, absolute authority. His eyes, those swirling vortexes of starlight, swept over them, and in their depths, there was no anger. No hatred. No desire for revenge. There was only a vast, soul-crushing disappointment. And that was infinitely more terrifying. The silence stretched for an eternity. The breeze rustled the leaves of the skeletal trees. A distant bird chirped. No one dared to breathe. They were mortals in the presence of something they could no longer define. It was Beerus, goaded by a combination of fear and his own indomitable pride, who broke the spell. He couldn't stand the silence, the judgment in those quiet, stellar eyes. So, the god of destruction snarled, his voice a low growl. The stray has come home. I hope you enjoyed your extended training. Goku's gaze settled on him. He didn't respond. He just watched, his serenity an unbreachable wall. The lack of a reaction infuriated Beerus more than any threat could have. He was a god of destruction. He commanded respect. He demanded fear. This was nothing. Don't you ignore me, you insolent scion. Beerus roared, his purple aura flaring to life, a chaotic storm of destructive energy that warped the air around him. You think a little time alone has put you on my level? Let me remind you of your place. He vanished, reappearing directly in front of Goku, his fist drawn back, a sphere of pure Hakai energy, the very essence of erasure, crackling around his knuckles. It was a blow meant to unmake reality itself. Vegeta and the others braced themselves for the impact that would surely shatter the planet, if not the solar system. Goku didn't move. He didn't tense. He didn't even blink. As Beerus's fist shot forward, aimed directly at his face. Goku raised his left hand, his movements unhurried, almost casual. He held up a single finger. The fist, carrying the power to erase galaxies, connected with the tip of that single finger. There was no sound. No shockwave. No explosion. The sphere of Hakai energy, the ultimate power of a god of destruction, simply vanished. It was not deflected. It was not absorbed. It was nullified. A switch had been flipped, and the concept of its existence had been turned off. Beerus was left frozen in place, his fist pressed against Goku's finger, his arm trembling from the phantom force of a blow that had ceased to be. He stared, his mind refusing to comprehend what had just happened. He had thrown a star, and it had been caught by a thimble. Goku's stellar eyes met his. "Your power is loud, Beerus," he said, his voice quiet, yet it carried across the clearing with absolute clarity. "It leaves you no room to listen." With a flick of his finger, a motion so small it was almost imperceptible, he sent a ripple of force through Beerus's body. It wasn't an attack. It was a command. Beerus was thrown backward, not with violence, but with an irresistible, absolute authority. He tumbled through the air, landing in a heap at the foot of the feasting table, scattering plates and goblets. He wasn't hurt, but his pride, his very concept of himself as a supreme being, was shattered. Goku lowered his hand. His gaze drifted past the stunned god of destruction to the others. He looked at Whis. "You lied, Whis," Goku stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple, undeniable fact. "You used my trust, and your sister's, to set a trap. I thought you were my teacher. My friend." Whis flinched, his serene mask finally cracking completely. He looked down at his staff, unable to meet Goku's gaze. It was, deemed necessary. A calculus of risk. Your potential for growth was limitless, and so was your potential to attract disaster. We feared you would one day attract an enemy that not even you could defeat, an enemy that would end everything. So you became that enemy instead, Vados finished for him, her voice dripping with ice. "How very prudent of you, little brother." Whis winced at her words, a look of genuine pain crossing his face. Finally, Goku's gaze fell upon them. The Z-Fighters. His friends. His family. Vegeta met his look with a defiant glare, but it was brittle. "We did what we had to do, Kakarot. For the good of the universe." "The good of the universe?" Marcarita scoffed, her voice sharp. "Or for your own peace of mind. To silence the fear that he had so completely surpassed you." Vegeta's face contorted in a snarl, but he had no retort. Her words had struck the core of his insecurity. Goku's eyes moved to Piccolo, who simply bowed his head in a gesture of solemn shame. And then, he looked at Gohan. His son stood trembling, tears streaming freely down his face. "Dad. We were scared. After the tournament of power. Zeno could have erased us all. We thought your next fight would be the last one, for everyone. I had to protect Pan. I had to," his voice broke, choked by a year of accumulated guilt. Goku listened. He took in their fear, their justifications, their pain. He processed it all through the lens of his thousand-year clarity. And he understood. He truly, completely, understood why they had done it. And that understanding was the final, terrible blow. He didn't scream. He didn't rage. He didn't raise a fist. He just looked at them, at the faces he had loved, fought for, and died for, and he gave them the worst punishment imaginable. "I understand," he said, and his voice was gentle. It was the gentleness that broke them. "You were afraid. I understand that. You did what you thought was right." He took a step forward, and they all flinched. But he just continued to speak, his voice calm and even. "But what you have to understand," he said, his stellar eyes holding each of them in turn, "is that the man you were afraid of, the man you trapped in that room, he's gone. You killed him. You succeeded. Gohan let out a strangled sob. The bonds we had, the family we were, you burned that all away to power a cage, Goku continued, his voice unwavering. And I can't rebuild it. I don't know how. I don't even know if I want to. He looked at them one last time, his expression one of profound, heartbreaking finality. I forgive you. I do. I hold no anger towards you. But I can't go back. We can't go back. From this day forward, we are strangers. The words landed with the force of a physical impact. This was not a declaration of war. It was a decree of divorce. An emotional erasure more complete than any Hakai. He wasn't their enemy. He was just, no longer theirs. As the weight of his words settled, a sudden, piercing chime echoed from Whis' staff. The angel looked down, his eyes widening in alarm. A cosmic alert, Whis announced, his voice strained. A Class 9 reality distortion event. A void signature. In Universe 10. He looked up, his face pale. It matches the energy profile of the secondary enchantments woven into the seal. The ones we didn't create. The ones your masters created, Marcarita corrected coldly. Whis' composure finally shattered. He looked at Goku, a desperate plea in his eyes. The seal, it wasn't just our idea. We were manipulated. A faction, a high-level sect of gods calling themselves the Celestial Arbiters. They came to us. They provided the framework for the seal. They argued that a mortal wielding divine energy was a heresy that would unravel the fabric of cosmic law. They preyed on our fears. They used us. Goku listened, his expression unchanging. A new piece of the puzzle, slotting into place. The betrayal was deeper, the conspiracy wider than he had imagined. But it didn't change the outcome. A void signature, Goku repeated thoughtfully, the words tasting strange on his tongue. He looked out, past the weeping Gohan and the shattered Beerus, toward the endless green cosmos. He felt it now, a faint, distant wrongness. A patch of silence in the universal song. He turned his back on the Z-Fighters, on the wreckage of his old life. Vados and Marcarita fell into step beside him, a silent, unshakable trinity. Where are you going? Gohan cried out, taking a step forward. Goku paused, but did not turn around. The Arbiters, this void, it is a threat, Goku said, his voice carrying on the wind. Not to a single universe, but to all of them. To the concept of existence itself. We will help. Vegeta declared, his voice filled with a desperate need for redemption. We will fight with you. Goku was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his words the final nail in the coffin of their shared history. I don't need your help, he said, without a trace of malice or pride. It was a simple statement of fact. This is not your fight. He looked at Vados, then at Marcarita. A silent understanding passed between them. With a grace that defied physics, the two angels placed their hands on his shoulders. The space around them shimmered, folding in on itself. And then, they were gone. They left behind a shattered god of destruction, a disgraced angel, and a group of warriors who had betrayed their greatest hero to save the universe, only to realize they had broken the one thing that truly held it together. They were left in the silence, with nothing but the echo of his final, chilling words and the gaping, unfillable void his departure had left in their world. Chapter 4, Whispers of the Void. The transition was not like instant transmission. There was no jarring lurch, no sense of molecules being ripped apart and reassembled. It was like the universe simply folded around them, one point in spacetime becoming adjacent to another. One moment they were standing on the verdant lawn of Beerus's planet, the next they were floating in the silent, chilling emptiness of interstellar space. The shift was as seamless and silent as their new dynamic. Below them hung the 10th universe, a swirling galaxy of muted purples and deep indigos. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic swirl of their home universe. This was a place of quiet, dignified life, overseen by the gentle god of creation, Goku. Or at least, it had been. The coordinates from your brother's staff are precise, Marcarita stated, her eyes scanning the cosmic tapestry before them. A complex star chart, woven from pure energy, materialized in front of her. The anomaly is located in the Zelatrian Nebula. Or what's left of it. Goku looked where she indicated. The Zelatrian Nebula had once been a famous celestial nursery, a place of vibrant, clashing gases where new stars were born every millennium. Now, it was a graveyard. The brilliant colors were gone, replaced by a sickly, monochromatic gray. The stars within it were not shining, they were petrified, their light frozen and dead, like dusty diamonds scattered on black velvet. It was as if someone had painted over a masterpiece with ash. It feels cold, Goku said, the first word spoken since their departure. It wasn't a physical coldness, space was always cold. This was a spiritual chill, an absence of warmth, of life, of ki. It's not just dead. It's empty. The life force has been excised, Vados observed, her staff humming softly as she took readings. Not destroyed, as a Hakai would. Not consumed, as a planet-eater would. It has been, unwritten. Erased from the ledger of existence. They moved toward it, not in a cube of light or by a streaking aura, but with Vados and Marcarita manipulating the space ahead of them, pulling their destination closer while simultaneously pushing their starting point away. They flowed through the cosmos like a thought, silent and untraceable. The closer they got, the more profound the wrongness became. The very laws of physics seemed weary, tired. Light from distant galaxies seemed to bend around the dead nebula, reluctant to enter. There, Marcarita said, pointing toward the heart of the gray expanse. The epicenter of the event. A single planetary system. They emerged from their spatial fold into the system's orbit. It had once held 7 planets orbiting a vibrant yellow star. Now, the star was a black, lightless cinder. The planets were husks, their atmospheres stripped away, their surfaces smooth and featureless, like gray river stones. All except one. The 4th planet, a world that had once been a lush paradise teeming with a species of sentient crystalline flora, was in the final stages of its consumption. From their vantage point, they could see the process happening in real time. A sphere of perfect, unreflective blackness, roughly the size of a city, hovered over the planet's northern pole. It was not a shadow, it was a hole in reality. A patch of absolute nothing. The vibrant, crystalline forests that covered the planet were losing their luster, the process creeping down from the pole. The light within the crystals was draining away, flowing in invisible rivers of energy toward the black sphere. The planet was being bled dry, its very essence being siphoned into the void. The psychic death screams of the crystalline lifeforms were a silent, agonizing chorus that echoed in the minds of the 3 observers. Goku's serene expression hardened. The pity he had felt for his betrayers was a distant memory. This was not a misguided act of fear. This was an abomination. We need to get those people out of there, he said, his voice low and firm. Goku, the life forms are intrinsically tied to the planet, Vados cautioned, her face grim. To move them would be to kill them. Their consciousness is planetary. Then we stop this. Now, he declared. They descended, landing silently on a vast, crystalline plain that had not yet been touched by the encroaching emptiness. The ground beneath their feet was a network of translucent, glowing blue crystals, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light, like a sleeping heart. The air hummed with a soft, melodic energy. It was a world of profound peace, now under sentence of death. As they stood there, a section of the crystalline plane ahead of them began to change. The light within the crystals flickered and died. The vibrant blue faded to a dull, lifeless gray. The crystals themselves seemed to sag, their sharp, geometric edges softening as their internal structure collapsed. From this patch of dead earth, a figure rose. It had once been a guardian of this world, a being woven from the strongest and purest crystals, a beautiful, towering golem of living light. Now, it was a perversion. Its body was the same dead gray as the ground it came from, its form distorted, its light gone. Where a face of intricate facets should have been, there was only a smooth, polished surface, reflecting nothing. It was a hollow shell, animated by a will that was not its own. A servant, Marcarita murmured, her professional curiosity warring with her disgust. The void appears to corrupt the most powerful entity in a given domain and use it as a vessel. The creature, the null-sworn as Marcarita had named it, took a step toward them. It made no sound, but its intent was clear. It was a sentinel, and they were trespassers in its master's feeding ground. "I'll handle this," Goku said, taking a step forward. "We handle this," Vados corrected gently, moving to his right. "Together," Marcarita affirmed, taking his left. Goku looked at them, a flicker of his old, familiar grin touching his lips, now filtered through a millennium of wisdom. Together. The null-sworn attacked. It raised its arm, and the dead gray ground erupted. Spikes of lifeless crystal, each the size of a skyscraper, shot from the earth, aimed at impaling the trio. The attack was fast, powerful, and utterly silent. There was no telltale surge of ki to sense, no build-up of energy. It just happened. But they were faster. Goku didn't move. He simply extended his hand, and a barrier of pure, condensed will, shimmering like heat haze, appeared before them. The massive crystal spikes shattered against it, not with a crash, but by crumbling into fine, gray dust, their corrupted structure unable to withstand contact with his zenith energy. Simultaneously, Vados tapped the butt of her staff on the ground. A circle of shimmering, turquoise energy spread out from the point of impact, expanding in a ring around them. Temporal field established. Its movements are now 3.7 seconds behind our own perception. The null-sworn, which had begun to charge forward, suddenly seemed to be moving through thick tar, its motions impossibly slow. Gravitational anchor set, Marcarita announced, her own staff glowing with a soft, pink light. She pointed it at the creature. Its local mass has been increased by a factor of 10,000. It should have the mobility of a small moon. The null-sworn, already struggling against the temporal field, now buckled, its legs cracking under its own impossible weight. It crashed to its knees, its gray arms straining to push itself back up. This was their new way of fighting. It wasn't a brawl. It was a dissection. A systematic, overwhelming application of strategy and physics-defying power. They were a three-person army, each member a master of a different aspect of warfare, a spearhead, a controller, and a strategist. Goku moved. He didn't use instant transmission. He simply stepped, folding the space between himself and the null-sworn. He appeared directly before the kneeling creature, his hand glowing with a soft, white light. The null-sworn, sensing the immediate threat, abandoned its attempt to stand. It swung its massive arm in a desperate, horizontal arc, its attack still lagging, moving in a dreamlike slow motion from their perspective. Goku didn't dodge. He flowed around the attack, his body moving with a liquid grace that seemed to defy his own solid form. He placed his glowing palm on the center of the creature's chest. "Your fight is over, Guardian," he said softly. "Be at peace." He didn't blast it with a wave of energy. He infused it. His zenith energy, a force of pure, ordered creation, poured into the null-sworn's corrupted form. It was like pouring clean water into a cup of poison. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a single point of brilliant blue light, the original color of the world's crystals, appeared where Goku's hand rested. The light spread rapidly, a web of pure energy driving back the encroaching gray. The null-sworn's body convulsed, its smooth, featureless face cracking as the light tried to reclaim it. But the corruption was too deep. The void's hold was absolute. The creature's form couldn't handle the two opposing forces. It was being torn apart from the inside. With a final, silent scream that tore through their minds, the nullsworn shattered. It didn't explode. It imploded, collapsing in on itself before dissolving into a cloud of fine, glittering dust, half dead gray, half brilliant blue, that was scattered on the wind. The temporal and gravitational fields dissipated. The silence of the plane returned, now emptier than before. Goku stood where the creature had been, his hand still outstretched. He had not fought it. He had tried to heal it. And he had failed. As the dust settled, something remained, hovering in the air. It was a psychic echo, a spiritual residue left behind by the creature's unmaking. A single, dark, shimmering memory. Marcarita extended her staff, and the memory was drawn to it, swirling into a small, dark orb at its tip. The creature's final moments. Its connection to its master. The three of them gathered around, their faces grim. Vados placed her hand on Goku's shoulder, a silent gesture of comfort. "Show us," Goku said. Marcarita nodded. She tapped her staff, and the orb expanded, enveloping them in the memory. They were no longer on the crystalline plane. They were in a place of absolute, infinite, and eternal silence. It was a darkness that was not the absence of light, but a presence in itself. It was a cold that was not the absence of heat, but the chilling certainty of absolute zero. It was a consciousness, vast and ancient, a being not of matter or energy, but of pure concept. It was not evil. It was not hateful. It felt no malice. It only felt a profound, deep, and patient hunger. A need to return all the noise, all the light, all the frantic, pointless struggle of existence back to the perfect, beautiful, silent state from which it had sprung. It saw creation not as a wonder, but as a flaw. A stain. A brief, chaotic mistake that needed to be corrected. And they heard its name, not as a word, but as a concept imprinted directly on their minds. The null. The vision shifted. They saw a cage. Not a cage of bars and locks, but a cage of laws. A prison woven from the fundamental constants of the multiverse, an intricate equation holding the concept of non-existence at bay. It was a masterpiece of divine engineering, created at the dawn of time by the first angels. And they saw it weakening. They saw the threads of the cage, the very laws of reality, fraying. They saw a thread snap when Zamasu's paradox was erased by Zeno. They saw another weaken during the sheer, reality-shaking force of the tournament of power. And then they saw the final, critical blow. They saw an image of the hyperbolic time chamber. They saw the golden seal flare to life, a perversion of angelic law, a massive, arrogant wrench thrown into the delicate workings of the cosmic machine. It didn't just imprison Goku. It sent a shockwave through the very axioms of reality, a discordant note that shattered a key resonant frequency in the null's cage. The vision ended. They were back on the dying crystalline world, the psychic echo dissolving into nothingness. The three of them stood in silence, the weight of the revelation crashing down on them. "My brother," Vados whispered, her voice filled with a horrified disbelief. "Beerus." Goku's own friends, they didn't know, Marcarita finished, her face pale. In their desperate, foolish attempt to contain a perceived threat, they have helped to unleash a genuine one. They tried to stop a ripple in a pond and, in doing so, have cracked the dam holding back the ocean. Goku looked up at the black sphere hovering over the pole, the hole in reality that was slowly, patiently drinking the life of this world. He looked at the dead gray corruption spreading across the beautiful landscape. His betrayal was no longer just a personal pain. It was a cosmic catalyst. An act of fear that had become the key to unlocking the ultimate doom. The irony was so profound, so devastating, it transcended bitterness, landing in a place of cold, hard resolution. "The arbiters," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "They had to know. This wasn't an accident. They didn't just prey on Whis' fear. They guided his hand. They gave him the exact formula, the precise perversion of divine law they knew would damage the null's prison. But why? Vados asked, shaking her head. To what end? No one, not even the most zealous god, would wish for this. Unless, Marcarita began, her stellar eyes widening as a terrible hypothesis formed in her mind, unless they believe they can control it. Or that they have a weapon that can defeat it. A weapon that requires the null to be free. The implications were staggering. A faction of gods, so arrogant and so zealous in their crusade against mortal potential, that they would risk universal annihilation as part of their gambit. Goku clenched his fists. His serenity was a mask now, covering a cold, focused fury that was 1,000 times more dangerous than the blind rage he had once felt. His personal tragedy had become the opening act for a universal one. His quest was no longer for understanding or peace. It was for justice. And for survival. He looked at the black sphere, the wound in the sky. He couldn't save this world. It was too late. But he could avenge it. The Arbiters want a monster to justify their tyranny, Goku said, his voice a low, dangerous hum. They unleash the end of all things just to prove themselves right. He looked at Vados and Marcarita, his stellar eyes burning with a cold fire. Let's show them what a real monster looks like. Chapter 5, The Arbiter's Gambit. The message did not arrive on a divine scroll or as a telepathic whisper. It was delivered with the cold, impersonal brutality of a galactic supernova. As Goku, Vados, and Marcarita departed the dying shell of Universe 10, a universal decree flashed across the cosmic network, a signal visible to every god, angel, and celestial being across all 12 universes. A moving, three-dimensional image of Goku's face, captured from the moment he had stepped out of the time chamber, was broadcast everywhere. His expression was serene, his eyes swirling with starlight. He looked every bit the transcendent being he had become. Beneath the image, a single line of text burned in the divine language of the angels, a script of pure, incandescent energy. Son Goku of Universe 7, Hereticus Prima. By edict of the celestial arbiters, this mortal has consorted with the void, corrupted angelic beings, and achieved a state of power deemed a cosmic heresy. His existence is an unraveling. He is to be captured by any means necessary. Lethal force is sanctioned. All who harbor or aid him will be judged as co-conspirators. The edict was signed with the sigil of the arbiters, a perfectly balanced scale, wreathed in silver fire. It was a declaration of war, broadcast with the arrogance of those who believe they are the ultimate authority. They're not just hunting us, Marcarita observed, her voice tight with fury as she watched the decree fade from the space before them. They are framing us. They're painting you as the cause of the very chaos they have unleashed. It's a clever gambit, Vados mused, her expression cold and analytical. The null's emergence is now your fault. Any god who might have questioned their authority will now fall in line out of fear. They have turned the entire divine hierarchy into their personal posse. Goku said nothing. He simply watched the space where his face had been branded a universal threat. They had taken his image, his moment of transcendence, and twisted it into a wanted poster. It was a calculated, petty act of desecration. He felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just about power or control. This was personal. Lord Executor Kalis, whoever he was, didn't just want him dead. He wanted him erased from memory as a hero, remembered only as a monster. They'll expect us to run, Goku said, his voice a low hum. They'll expect us to hide in a pocket dimension or an uncatalogued world, to try and survive. A logical course of action, Marcarita agreed. We are three against the entire divine apparatus. Which is exactly why we won't do it, Goku stated, turning to them. A dangerous glint appeared in his stellar eyes. They've declared war. It's time we gave them one. But we do it on our terms. We need information. We need to know who these arbiters are, where they are based, and what their endgame is. And we need to get that information somewhere they won't expect us to be. Vados raised an eyebrow. You have a destination in mind? The Nexus, Goku said, a name that made both angels pause. The Nexus was not a planet. It was a city-state built on a cluster of asteroids, magically bound together and anchored in a pocket dimension that existed precisely on the border between Universe 6 and Universe 7. It was a crossroads, a neutral ground, a chaotic, sprawling hub of commerce, information, and intrigue that operated outside the jurisdiction of any god of destruction or Kai. It was the Mos Eisley of the multiverse, a place where retired gods, rogue warriors, information brokers, and celestial fugitives mingled freely. It was loud, dangerous, and the last place anyone would expect to find three beings on the run from the highest echelons of divine power. Bold, Vados commented, a slow smile spreading across her face. My brother and Lord Kompa have a pact to ignore its existence entirely. It causes them both too many headaches. The perfect place to hide in plain sight, Marcarita conceded, catching on to the strategy. The Arbiter's authority is absolute, but their reach relies on the established divine network. The Nexus has no network. It's a black hole for information. Exactly, Goku affirmed. We go there, we listen, we find a thread. And we let them come to us. Their journey to the Nexus was a testament to their caution. They made a dozen spatial folds, passing through the empty spaces between galaxies, their energy signatures completely masked by a technique Vados and Marcarita had perfected over centuries. They were ghosts, moving through the cosmos, their every step erasing the one before it. The entrance to the Nexus was a shimmering, heat haze-like distortion in space, hidden in the shadow of a dying red giant. They passed through it and emerged into a scene of breathtaking, chaotic beauty. Dozens of massive, city-sized asteroids floated in a brilliant, star-filled void, connected by bridges of solid light and streams of flowing, waterfalls of pure energy. Ships of every conceivable design, from organic-looking leviathans to sleek, metallic fighters, zipped between the asteroids. The central asteroid, known as the Core, was a sprawling metropolis of towering, mismatched spires, glowing neon signs in 1,000 different alien languages, and bustling open-air markets. The air, contained by a breathable atmospheric bubble, thrummed with the energy of 1,000,000 different beings from 1,000,000 different worlds. The sheer psychic noise was a deafening roar. They landed in a shadowed docking bay on the underbelly of a lesser asteroid, far from the main thoroughfares. They had altered their appearance slightly. Vados and Marcarita had changed the color of their hair and skin to more common tones, their angelic halo suppressed. Goku, for his part, had simply put on a hooded cloak, the deep cowl shadowing his face. It was a simple disguise, but in a place this crowded, anonymity was the best camouflage. They walked into the city proper, and the sensory assault was immediate. The smells of sizzling alien street food, the sounds of a dozen different musical styles clashing in the air, the sight of beings of every shape and size, from hulking, four-armed brutes to tiny, insectoid merchants, all haggling, shouting, and living their lives. The information brokers tend to congregate in the lower bazaar on the Core, Marcarita said, her voice low as she scanned the crowds, her analytical mind already cataloging threat levels and escape routes. They're paranoid and expensive, but they hear everything. They navigated the crowded streets and light bridges, a silent, focused trio in a sea of chaos. Goku's senses, honed by 1,000 years of meditation, were on high alert. He could feel the key of every being around them, a tapestry of 1,000,000 threads. He felt the greed of an arms dealer, the desperation of a fugitive, the weary resignation of an ancient being who had seen too much. And underneath it all, he felt a new, discordant thread. An energy that was clean, orderly, and utterly out of place. It was the energy of divine law. Cold. Rigid. Uncompromising. "They're here," Goku murmured, his hand subtly gesturing to his left. 5 of them. Trying to suppress their signatures, but they can't hide what they are. Vados and Marcarita tensed, their gazes flicking nonchalantly in the direction he indicated. They saw them. 5 beings, dressed in simple traveler's clothes, but moving with a synchronized, disciplined grace that marked them as soldiers. They were spaced out through the crowd, forming a loose, tightening net. They weren't just here. They were waiting for them. It was a trap, Vados breathed, her mind racing. They knew we would seek out a place like this. They anticipated our strategy. So we adapt, Goku said, his voice calm. He guided them down a narrower, darker side street, away from the main flow of traffic. The 5 divine soldiers followed, their movements becoming more purposeful, their net drawing tighter. They're hurting us, Marcarita noted. Away from the crowds. They want to minimize witnesses. Good, Goku said, a cold smile touching his lips. So do I. They turned a corner into a deserted loading bay, a dead end. The towering walls of mismatched metal and stone blocked out the neon glow of the city, plunging them into shadow. At the far end of the bay, a massive, rusted cargo door was sealed shut. They were boxed in. A moment later, the 5 soldiers appeared at the entrance to the alley, blocking their only exit. They stood silhouetted against the bright lights of the street behind them. Then they shed their disguises. Their simple clothes dissolved into shimmering light, replaced by immaculate, silver and white armor that seemed to absorb the shadows. Their helmets materialized over their heads, featureless and mirrored, hiding any trace of individuality. In their hands, they held lances that crackled with a pure, white energy. These were not gods. They were not angels. They were something else. The Praetorian Guard of the Arbiters. The lead Praetorian stepped forward, his voice a synthesized, emotionless monotone that echoed in the enclosed space. Son Goku. By the authority of the Celestial Arbiters, you are under arrest. Your illegal powers will be nullified. Surrender now and your angelic companions may be granted the mercy of re-education. Goku looked at Vados and Marcarita. The threat, aimed at them, was the final mistake the Praetorians could have made. Nullified? Goku asked, his voice dangerously soft. He took a step forward, letting the hood of his cloak fall back. His face was revealed, his stellar eyes glowing with a calm, cold light in the darkness of the alley. You talk about my power as if it's a weapon I picked up. You don't understand. It's not something I have. It's what I am. The Praetorians raised their lances. Irrelevant. The law is absolute. All illegal divine energy signatures in this quadrant are now proscribed. As he spoke, a strange sensation washed over them. It was as if a fundamental rule had just been written into the fabric of this specific location. Goku felt a subtle resistance, a friction against his own energy. A legal field, Marcarita explained, her eyes narrowed. They have the authority to temporarily rewrite local reality. They have outlawed the use of divine ki. Any attempt to use it will be met with extreme metaphysical resistance. It's like trying to swim through concrete. A clever power, Goku admitted. But it's based on a flawed premise. And what is that? The lead Praetorian asked. Goku smiled, a chilling, serene expression. It assumes it knows what it's banning. He vanished. Not with instant transmission. Not with a burst of speed. He simply ceased to be in one spot and appeared in another, right in the center of the 5 Praetorians. He had not used a technique. He had willed it. He had bent space, a feat that required no divine ki, as the Praetorians defined it, only a perfect understanding of it. The Praetorians reacted instantly, their movements flawlessly synchronized. They thrust their lances inward, aiming to impale him from 5 different directions. But Goku was already moving. He dropped low, the lances passing over his head, and swept his leg in a powerful arc. His leg connected with their ankles, but he wasn't trying to trip them. He was injecting a precise frequency of kinetic energy into their armor. The 5 soldiers stumbled, their synchronized formation broken. For a split second, their legal field flickered. That was all Vados and Marcarita needed. In that instant, Vados tapped her staff on the ground, not releasing a wave of energy, but a single, complex command. Stasis. The Praetorian on the far left froze completely, his body locked in a forward-lurching pose, a statue of silver and white. Marcarita, in the same instant, pointed her staff at the one on the far right. Inversion. The soldier's own personal energy field, designed to protect him, suddenly turned inward. His armor began to groan and buckle, crushed by his own power. 3 were left. They recalibrated instantly, recognizing the new threat. 2 turned on the angels, while the leader refocused on Goku. "Your tricks are meaningless," the leader declared, swinging his lance in a wide, horizontal arc. The edge of the lance didn't cut, it erased, leaving a trail of shimmering, distorted space in its wake. Goku didn't back away. He moved forward, into the attack. As the lance swept toward him, he raised his hand, his fingers open. But his hand was shimmering, vibrating at an impossible frequency. He was phasing, shifting his own atoms between states of being. The lance passed harmlessly through his body. The Praetorian's helmeted face, for all its featurelessness, somehow conveyed a sense of utter shock. "Your law bans divine energy," Goku said, his hand closing around the haft of the lance, his body solidifying. The lance, a weapon of pure divine law, sizzled and sparked in his grip, but it did not harm him. But is this energy? Or is it matter? Is it a wave? Or a particle? He was using the philosophical lessons from his 1,000-year training. He was creating attacks that existed in a state of quantum flux, a superposition of states that the Praetorian's rigid, binary law system could not define, and therefore could not ban. He ripped the lance from the Praetorian's grasp. The soldier, disarmed, instinctively fell back on his training, launching a rapid-fire series of hand-to-hand strikes. Goku blocked them effortlessly, his movements a fluid dance. He wasn't just defending. He was placing his palms and fingers on the joints and power conduits of the Praetorian's armor, not striking, but touching. With each touch, he sent a tiny, controlled pulse of his zenith energy, not enough to trigger the legal field's ban, but enough to disrupt the flow of power within the armor. Meanwhile, Vados and Marcarita fought their own battle. It was a display of effortless, elegant dominance. The 2 Praetorians attacking them were met with a baffling array of spatial and temporal traps. A soldier would lunge, only to find himself suddenly 10 feet to the left, his attack hitting empty air. Another would swing his lance, only to have a localized time loop capture the weapon, forcing it to repeat the first inch of its arc over and over again. They weren't fighting. They were editing. Deleting attack vectors, rewinding time, creating gravitational anomalies. They disarmed and disabled their 2 opponents without taking a single step, their expressions bored, as if they were tidying up a messy room. Back with Goku, the lead Praetorian was faltering. The lights on his armor were flickering. His movements were becoming sluggish. What are you?" the Praetorian demanded, his synthesized voice laced with static, with something that sounded almost like fear. "I'm a scion from Earth," Goku said, his face inches from the Praetorian's mirrored helmet. "And you and your masters made a very big mistake." He placed his open palm on the center of the Praetorian's chest plate. "This isn't energy. This isn't force. This is just will." A wave of pure, silent, conceptual power flowed from his hand. It wasn't an attack. It was a shutdown command. The lights on the Praetorian's armor went out. His body went rigid, and he fell backward, crashing to the ground like an empty suit of armor, completely inert. Goku stood, the captured lance in his hand. He looked over at the others. Vados was holding her Praetorian in a bubble of frozen time. Marcarita's was writhing on the ground, his armor now completely crumpled around him. They had won. It hadn't even been a fight. It had been a statement. Goku walked over to the last conscious Praetorian, the one Vados held in stasis. He looked at the frozen figure, then at the lance in his hand. He could feel the energy humming within it, the connection it had to its masters. He held the lance before the Praetorian's helmeted face. He focused his will, not into the soldier, but into the weapon, using it as a conduit, a key to unlock the network it was connected to. Now, Goku said, his voice a low command that seemed to echo across the multiverse. Let's see who you work for. The lance flared with a brilliant silver light. A torrent of information, of names, star charts, and secret communications, flooded from the weapon directly into Goku's mind. He saw the face of Lord Executor Kalos, a stern, zealous-looking god with eyes of cold fire. He saw the location of their primary command fortress, a structure hidden in the chaotic energies of an unstable nebula. He saw their entire plan, to use the null as a cleansing fire, to scour the multiverse of the heresy of mortal potential, and then to use a superweapon, the cosmic anvil, to reseal it, leaving them as the saviors and undisputed rulers of a new, ordered reality. The information flooded him, a billion points of data processed in a nanosecond. He had it. He had everything. He lowered the lance, the light fading. He now knew their enemy, their location, and their goal. He had sprung their trap and taken their queen. They were no longer fugitives, hiding in the shadows. They were now the hunters. And they had a target. Chapter 6, A Shadow over Xeno. The Nexus loading bay was a silent tableau of defeat. 5 suits of the Arbiter's finest armor lay inert, their occupants neutralized but alive, a testament to a restraint their masters would never have shown. The captured lance in Goku's hand hummed with a dying energy, its secrets now laid bare in his mind. A command fortress called Aeterna, Goku said, the name leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. He processed the torrent of data he had ripped from the Praetorian network, his mind sifting through tactical readouts and strategic plans with an efficiency that would have taken a mortal supercomputer a century. Hidden within the maelstrom of discord in Universe 3. And a superweapon, the cosmic anvil. Designed to collapse a pocket of reality. They intend to let the null spread, consume their enemies, and then use the anvil to heroically seal it away, taking credit for saving a multiverse they nearly destroyed. The hubris is breathtaking, Vados murmured, her lips a thin line of contempt. She waved her staff, and the 5 inert Praetorians, along with their crumpled armor, dissolved into motes of light and vanished. Relocated to a barren, forgotten moon. They'll wake up with a headache and a long walk home. It's a sound strategy, from a certain sociopathic point of view, Marcarita added, her analytical mind piecing together the enemy's logic. They force a crisis that only they have the solution to. When the dust settles, they are hailed as saviors, their authority becomes absolute, and any opposition has been conveniently erased by the null. Goku's stellar eyes narrowed. He looked at the vast, chaotic cityscape of the Nexus beyond the alley. The sounds of life, of commerce, of joy and struggle, seemed more precious now, more fragile. Kalos and his arbiters saw all of this as a disease to be cured. We have their location, Goku stated, his voice firm. We go to Universe 3. We go to Aeterna. We dismantle the anvil, and we deal with Kalos. A direct assault, Vados said, a hint of excitement in her voice. It has been a while. They will be expecting it, Marcarita cautioned. They know their Praetorians have failed. Their fortress will be on high alert. Let them be, Goku replied, his confidence a palpable force. They think their laws and their fortress make them untouchable. We've spent 1,000 years in a room that was truly untouchable. This will be no different. He was about to motion for them to depart, to fold space and begin their hunt, when a new presence made them all freeze. It was not a loud or aggressive energy. It was the opposite. It was a presence so vast, so ancient, and so perfectly controlled that it was like a sudden, absolute silence in the midst of a rock concert. It didn't arrive. It was simply, there. As if it had been there all along, and had only now chosen to be perceived. Goku, Vados, and Marcarita turned as one. Standing in the center of the loading bay, where only moments before there had been nothing, was the Grand Priest. He looked exactly as he always did. Small, serene, with a placid blue complexion and a faint, gentle smile playing on his lips. His white hair was styled in its usual upswept manner, and his simple blue robes were immaculate. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes, which held the wisdom of ages, were filled with a deep, profound weariness. And for the first time in their memory, the Omni King's most powerful servant looked strained. Vados and Marcarita instinctively bowed their heads, a gesture of respect so ingrained it was automatic. "Father," they said in unison. Goku did not bow. He stood his ground, his expression unreadable, his body relaxed but ready. He met the Grand Priest's gaze, an equal meeting an equal. The power radiating from the Grand Priest was immense, a boundless ocean of calm, but Goku's own zenith state was a star. It did not try to match the ocean's breadth, but it burned with a focused, internal intensity that was just as absolute. "Son Goku," the Grand Priest said. His voice the sound of chimes in a silent temple. "You have been busy." "I was given a great deal of free time," Goku replied, his tone even, without a hint of sarcasm or resentment. It was a simple statement of fact. The Grand Priest's faint smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Indeed. A regrettable series of events. One that I confess I did not foresee in its entirety." "Your children seem to be in a state of shock, father," Vados interjected, her voice formal but with an undercurrent of accusation. "Whis lied to us. He used us. He helped imprison us. Whis acted on information provided by the Arbiters, a faction he believed was operating with my tacit approval," the Grand Priest explained, his gaze shifting to his daughters. "He was deceived, as were many others. Lord Executor Kalis is a master of manipulation. He has woven a web of fear and dogma that has ensnared a significant portion of the divine hierarchy." "So you're here to stop them?" Marcarita asked, her tone sharp. "To dissolve the Arbiters and arrest Kalis for treason?" The Grand Priest's expression grew even more troubled. He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the multiverse. "I cannot." The three of them stared, stunned. "You cannot?" Goku repeated, his voice laced with a quiet disbelief. "You're the Grand Priest. Your authority is second only to Zeno's." "My authority is absolute in matters of divine law and the governance of the universes," the Grand Priest clarified. "However, the null is not a matter of governance. It is a primordial entity. It predates the current order. It predates Lord Zeno's creation. Eons ago, before this iteration of reality, the first angels and the forces of creation fought a war against the forces of entropy. The null was not destroyed, it was sealed. And the condition of that sealing, the Great Pact, was that no angel of the ordered creation may ever act directly against it." "Why?" Goku asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. "Because our very nature is anathema to it," the Grand Priest explained. "The energies we wield, the creative force that is the essence of our being, is like oxygen to its fire. A direct confrontation between an angel and the null would not weaken it. It would empower it. The result would be a catastrophic explosion of opposing concepts that would shatter reality far more effectively than the null could on its own. It is a stalemate written into the laws of existence itself." The truth of his words settled over them, a chilling revelation. The most powerful beings in the multiverse were, by their very nature, helpless against its greatest threat. "So you're just going to stand by and watch Kalis use it to burn everything to the ground?" Marcarita demanded, her composure finally cracking. "No," the Grand Priest said, his gaze settling firmly on Goku. "That is why I am here. The Great Pact binds angels of the ordered creation. But you are something new." He took a step closer, his eyes studying Goku's zenith form with an expression of profound fascination. "You are a mortal who has achieved a state of being that mirrors our own, yet it is not the same. Your power is not born of the great anvil of creation. It is born of a scion spirit, forged in a crucible of loss and tempered by 1,000 years of meditative insight. You are a loophole. A singularity that the ancient pacts did not account for. The pieces clicked into place in Goku's mind. The summons. The explanation. The strained expression. This wasn't a social call. It was a recruitment pitch. "You want my help," Goku stated. "I need your help, son Goku," the Grand Priest corrected, the admission costing him a visible effort. The null's influence is spreading faster than even the Arbiters anticipated. It has begun to fray the edges of the timelines themselves. Reality is becoming thin. Lord Zeno has not noticed yet. His perception is absolute, but it is focused on the now. He does not easily perceive the subtle corrosion of the was and the will be. But he will. And when he does, his solution will not be surgical. He will simply erase the corrupted timelines, the corrupted universes, until the problem is gone. Billions, trillions of lives, extinguished in an instant to cure a disease he cannot comprehend. The stakes, already impossibly high, had just been raised to a level Goku could barely fathom. This was no longer about stopping a zealot. This was about preventing the Omni King himself from wiping the slate clean. The Arbiters must be stopped, the Grand Priest continued. Their cosmic anvil must be destroyed before they can use it. And the null, it must be dealt with. I cannot act. My children cannot act. But you can. He raised a hand, and a scroll of pure, golden light materialized before him. I am prepared to offer you a full pardon. The edict of the Arbiters will be struck down. Your name will be cleared across all 12 universes. Kalos and his entire faction will be excommunicated and branded as traitors. Your companions, he glanced at Vados and Marcarita, will be absolved of any wrongdoing and have their status fully restored. All you have to do is agree to act as our champion. To be the sword of the divine order in this one, specific instance. It was the perfect offer. A return to grace. A restoration of their honor. Everything they had lost, handed back to them on a silver platter. The old Goku would have accepted without a second thought. The chance to fight the strongest enemy, to save everyone, and to have his friends back. It would have been an easy yes. But the old Goku was dead. He looked at Vados. He looked at Marcarita. He saw the conflict in their eyes. The offer was tempting. A return to their old lives, their status, their family. But he also saw the memory of their 1,000-year cage, the freedom they had found in their isolation, the bond they had forged that was stronger than any divine law. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their silent communication was faster and more honest than any words. They reached a consensus in a heartbeat. Goku turned back to the Grand Priest. The serene, almost detached calm had returned to his face. No, the word was quiet, but it hit the Grand Priest with the force of a physical blow. He stared, his composure finally breaking into open astonishment. No. I don't understand. I am offering you everything. You're offering me a leash, Goku corrected, his voice gentle but firm. A prettier cage than the last one, but a cage all the same. You want to make me a champion of the divine order. But I am not a part of your order anymore. You can't pardon someone who no longer recognizes your authority to condemn them. He took a step closer, his stellar eyes holding the Grand Priest's gaze without a trace of fear or arrogance. We will stop the Arbiters. We will deal with the null. We were already on our way to do so. But we won't do it for you. We won't do it for Zeno, or for the gods who stood by and let this happen. We will do it for the nameless, faceless trillions on worlds like the one we just left, the people whose lives are being used as pawns in a cosmic game they don't even know is being played. He looked at Vados and Marcarita, his partners, his family. Our allegiance is to each other. And to them. Not to you. The Grand Priest was speechless. He, the architect of the multiverse, the voice of the Omni King, had been refused. Not out of anger or pride, but out of a principle he could not argue against. He was facing a new kind of power. Not just physical or energetic, but moral. After a long, silent moment, the Grand Priest's strained expression softened into something else. A look of dawning, grudging respect. He had come to recruit a weapon and had found a king. "I see," he said softly. He let the golden scroll of pardon dissolve into nothing. "Your resolve is absolute." He raised his hand again. This time, what appeared was not a scroll, but a sphere of shimmering, multidimensional light. It was a map, but a map that existed in at least 6 dimensions, showing not just space, but time, probability, and the flow of cosmic energies. "This will not be easy," the Grand Priest said, his tone shifting from recruiter to reluctant ally. "Aeterna is not just a fortress, it is a bastion of distorted law. The arbiters have surrounded it with a web of conceptual defenses. Your powers, as they are, may be nullified or turned against you." He pointed to a specific point on the map, a swirling vortex of chaotic energy. "The maelstrom of discord. Their fortress is here. But the cosmic anvil is not. Kalos is not a fool. The weapon is kept separate, in a more secure, more secret location." The map shifted, and a new point began to glow, a place far beyond the borders of the 12 universes, in the unformed chaos that lay between them. A tear in the fabric of reality itself. "The silent sepulchre," the Grand Priest whispered, the name itself seeming to absorb the sound from the air. "An echo of the void from the last creation. It is the only place with a resonant frequency that can contain the anvil's power. And it is, I suspect, the place where Kalos intends to make his last stand." He looked at Goku, his expression grave. "But more than that, it is the closest access point to the Null's prison. It is the source of the rot. That is your ultimate destination." Goku studied the map, absorbing the information. A two-front war. One against the arbiters, one against the source of their power. An uneasy, unspoken alliance had been formed. The Grand Priest could not act, but he could provide information. He could point the gun. It was up to Goku to pull the trigger. "Your path is your own, son Goku," the Grand Priest said, his form beginning to shimmer. "But the fate of all existence now walks with you. Do not falter." And with that, he was gone. The absolute silence of his presence vanished, and the chaotic noise of the Nexus rushed back in to fill the void. Goku, Vados, and Marcarita stood alone in the loading bay, the 6-dimensional map glowing softly before them. They had refused a pardon from the highest power in the multiverse and, in doing so, had taken the full weight of that multiverse onto their shoulders. They were not champions. They were not soldiers. They were not heroes. They were a family. And their family was in danger. "Universe 3 first," Goku said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We take Kalos's fortress. We break his army. We send a message." He looked at his partners, a grim determination hardening his features. "And then we go to the silent sepulchre. We're going to the heart of nothingness. And we're going to remind it why it should be afraid of something." Chapter 7, The Heart of Nothingness. The Maelstrom of Discord in Universe 3 was a celestial masterpiece of chaos. It was a region of space where the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules, a swirling, violent nebula where rogue black holes danced with stars made of pure sonic energy and rivers of raw, uncreation matter flowed like cosmic rapids. Traveling through it by normal means was suicide. For the trio, it was merely an inconvenience. They moved through the storm not as a ship fighting a current, but as a thought passing through a dreamer's mind. Vados and Marcarita wove a cocoon of stable reality around them, a bubble of ordered space that sliced through the chaos like a hot knife through butter. Inside, Goku sat in a meditative state, the Grand Priest's multidimensional map unfurled in his mind. He was not just looking at a location, he was studying the very conceptual architecture of the Arbiter's defenses. Aeterna, Lord Kalos's fortress, was even more formidable than the Grand Priest had indicated. It was a crystalline spire the size of a continent, anchored to a rogue planetoid at the very eye of the maelstrom. But its true defense wasn't its walls or its fleet. It was a web of interlocking legal fields, a fortress of pure dogma. Within this sphere, all unsanctioned travel through folded space is proscribed. All energy signatures exceeding a specific celestial frequency are deemed hostile and subject to nullification. The concept of mortal is defined as inherently inferior and is subject to systemic energy drain. It was a fortress designed to defeat an army of gods, a place where the arbiter's authority was the ultimate physical law. They've legislated their own superiority, Marcarita commented dryly as Goku relayed the defensive structure to them. Arrogant to the very end. Their laws are rigid. Absolute, Goku observed, his eyes still closed. And anything absolute has a blind spot. They've built a wall to stop a tidal wave, but they've left the back door unlocked for a single drop of rain. He opened his eyes, the starlight within them burning with a focused intensity. We don't assault Aderna. Not yet. Their army is there. Their command structure is there. Let them wait. Let them posture behind their walls of words. We're going for the anvil. Vados and Marcarita looked at him, instantly understanding the shift in strategy. It was a classic misdirection. The enemy fortifies their capital, expecting a siege, while the real attack happens at their most critical, and supposedly most secret, asset. The silent sepulchre, Vados said, her voice a low whisper. The name alone felt heavy, forbidden. The Grand Priest said it lies outside the known universes, Marcarita added, calling up the map. In the unspace. The chaotic medium between multiversal clusters. Then that's where we go, Goku declared. Their journey shifted. They were no longer navigating a universe, but leaving it entirely. The fabric of reality grew thin around their bubble of stable space. The familiar lights of galaxies and stars faded, replaced by a churning, violent sea of pure potential. This was the unspace, the raw material of creation before it had been given form or law. It was a storm of concepts, a place where up, down, before, and after were meaningless. Light and shadow, matter and energy, life and death, all existed in a violent, undifferentiated soup. The journey itself was a battle. Raw, conceptual energies slammed against their protective bubble. Waves of pure causality tried to unwrite their existence. Pockets of absolute void, echoes of the null, attempted to drain their energy. It was a relentless, grinding assault that tested the limits of the angel's power. Vados and Marcarita stood back to back with Goku, their staffs glowing, their faces beaded with sweat, their combined power the only thing keeping the maelstrom of uncreation at bay. After a journey that could have been an hour or 1,000 years, they saw it. It was not a structure or a planet. It was a wound. A tear in the chaotic fabric of the unspace. A perfectly circular region of absolute, placid calm and utter blackness. It was the silent sepulchre. It radiated a silence so profound that it seemed to be actively devouring the conceptual chaos around it. As they approached, the nature of the assault changed. The chaotic, physical pressure from the unspace lessened, replaced by something far more insidious. The sepulchre began to attack their minds. They were no longer just a pilot and two navigators. They were three souls, exposed and vulnerable. The first vision struck Goku. He was standing in a green field under a warm sun. The air smelled of grass and clean laundry. He heard a child's laughter. He turned, and there was a small, rustic house, a plume of smoke curling from its chimney. Chi-Chi was on the porch, waving at him, her smile free from a lifetime of worry. Gohan, not the scholar but a young, happy boy with a fishing rod, ran towards him, his face alight with joy. "Dad! You're home." He felt a pang in his chest so sharp, so exquisitely painful, that it took his breath away. This was the life he could have had. The life he had always, in a secret corner of his heart, longed for. No fighting. No training. No world-ending threats. Just peace. Just family. Just, home. A voice, soft and seductive, whispered in his mind. It can still be yours. All of this. The betrayal was just a bad dream. A nightmare. Wake up, Goku. Wake up and be happy. You've earned it. Just let go. He felt the pull. The desire to sink into the warmth of the illusion, to forget the 1,000-year cage, to forget the null, to forget the crushing weight of his new reality. It would be so easy. He closed his eyes. He saw Gohan's face, not as a happy child, but as the grief-stricken man who had helped imprison him. He felt the cold of the time chamber. He felt Vados' hand on his, her touch grounding him across the centuries. He felt Marcarita's sharp wit, her unwavering loyalty. This warmth was a lie. His new reality, as painful as it was real. His new family was real. No, he whispered, the word a blade cutting through the illusion. The sun-drenched field flickered. Gohan's smiling face distorted, melting like wax. The voice in his head hissed in frustration, and the vision shattered, leaving him back in the bubble of stable space, the silent sepulchre looming before him. He was breathing heavily, a cold sweat on his brow. Goku? Vados' voice was tight with concern. I'm all right, he said, his voice strained. It shows you what you want. A past you can't have. As if on cue, the assault shifted to the angels. Vados found herself standing before the Omni Palace. The Grand Priest was before her, his smile warm and proud. My daughter, he said, his voice filled with affection. You have served your duty well. Your charge, Kampa, has matured. Your servitude is at an end. You are free. You may now ascend. Take your place among the true architects of creation. You can have a universe of your own to shape. To command. No more servitude. Only power. Your power. She saw it. The infinite potential. The freedom from the stifling laws that had bound her for eons. The chance to be a creator, a true goddess, not just an attendant. It was the ultimate ambition of every angel, a dream they were forbidden to even speak of. Then it was Marcarita's turn. She stood on a barren world, and before her stood a resurrected Jiren. But he was not just Jiren. He was the leader of a new, revitalized Pride Troopers, their ranks filled with the strongest warriors from across the 12 universes. And they all knelt before her. Guide us, Lady Marcarita, Jiren said, his voice filled with a reverence he had never shown anyone. Your wisdom, your strategy, is the ultimate justice. Help us bring true, absolute order to the cosmos. An order under your command. The offer was tailored to her very essence. Not just power, but a purpose. A chance to implement the perfect, logical, ordered universe she had always believed in, free from the whims of petty gods and foolish mortals. They both felt the pull. The temptation was a hook in their souls. But then, through their own individual visions, they felt Goku. They felt his hand in theirs, not in the vision, but in reality. A steady, warm, grounding presence. They felt the memory of 1,000 years of shared silence, of collaborative training, of a love that was deeper than any ambition, more real than any offer of power. Their cages had been lonely. Their freedom was shared. Vados looked at the vision of her father and shook her head. My place is with him. Marcarita looked at the kneeling army and her lips thinned. My justice is with him. The visions shattered. They were back in the bubble, the three of them, their hands clasped together, their breathing ragged. They had faced the temptation of their deepest desires and had chosen each other. Their bond, forged in the crucible of the time chamber, was not just a source of comfort. It was a weapon. A shield against the entropic despair of the void. It feeds on regret, Goku realized, his voice low. On ambition. On any desire that pulls you away from the now. The only way to fight it is to have nothing to regret and nowhere else you'd rather be. Then we are well defended, Vados said, her voice firm, her grip on his hand tightening. Their combined spiritual energy, a fusion of their three wills, flared. It burned like a star in the oppressive darkness, a beacon of unity against the sepulchre's psychological warfare. The mental assaults hissed and recoiled, unable to find purchase on a foundation so solid. They passed through the tear, entering the dimension of the silent sepulchre. It was a dimension of pure entropy, but an ordered entropy. Vast, continent-sized platforms of black, glassy material floated in a silent, starless void. The platforms were arranged in a series of concentric rings, all slowly orbiting a central point. It was a mausoleum the size of a solar system. And it was not empty. On every platform, legions of Nullsworn stood in silent, motionless ranks. They were warriors from 1,000 conquered worlds, 1,000,000 forgotten species. Crystalline golems, hulking brutes of living metal, winged insectoids, spectral energy beings, all of them stripped of their life and color, rendered into the same uniform, dead gray, their faces smooth, reflective voids. An army of the dead, millions strong, all waiting silently for a command. At the very center of the vast, orbiting rings, on the largest platform, stood their prize. The cosmic anvil. It was a colossal device, a structure of black, alien metal and pulsating, sickly purple energy conduits. It was easily the size of a mountain, its purpose clear even from a distance. It was designed to gather the entropic energy of this dimension and focus it into a single, reality-collapsing point. Standing before the anvil, as if admiring his work, was a single figure. He was tall and clad in ornate, golden armor that shimmered with divine power. His face was stern, his features sharp and aristocratic, his eyes burning with the cold, white fire of zealotry. It was Lord Executor Kalis. He was not alone. Flanking him were two beings that made Vados and Marcarita gasp. They were angels. But they were wrong. Their halos were a fractured, ugly black, and their skin was a pale, corpse-like gray. Their eyes were empty, hollow pits. They were angels who had renounced the Great Pact, who had sworn allegiance to Kalis and his new order. Fallen angels. Kalis turned as the trio landed on the central platform, 100 yards away from him. A slow, arrogant smile spread across his face. "Son Goku," he said, his voice smooth and resonant, yet utterly devoid of warmth. "And the two fallen doves. I must confess, I did not expect you to make it this far. The sepulchre's psychic defenses are usually quite persuasive. We're not as easily bought as your two pets," Goku countered, his gaze fixed on the two corrupted angels. He could feel their power, twisted and soured, a mockery of what Vados and Marcarita represented. Kalis chuckled. "Them. They are visionaries. They see the truth. The current divine order is weak, sentimental. It allows the chaos of mortal life to fester like a disease. The null is merely the cure. A cleansing fire. And with the anvil, we will control that fire, scour the universes clean, and build a new, perfect order from the ashes. An order of strength, discipline, and purpose. The order of a tyrant," Vados hissed. "The order of a savior," Kalis corrected, his eyes blazing. "And you, son Goku, are the final symptom of the disease. A mortal who has stumbled into a power you cannot possibly comprehend. You are a walking paradox, a disruption to the natural law. You must be erased." As he spoke, the millions of Nullsworn on the surrounding platforms began to stir. Their heads all turned in unison, their blank faces fixing on the three intruders. A low, humming drone began to build, the collective psychic intent of an army of the dead. Kalis raised his hand. "This is the end of your pathetic rebellion. You will not be judged by me. You will be judged by the silence. You will be unmade, and the multiverse will finally know peace." The humming drone became a roar. The legions of Nullsworn leaped from their platforms, a gray, silent tide of death, swarming toward the central platform from every direction. Goku looked at the incoming horde. He looked at the two fallen angels flanking Kalos. He looked at the colossal cosmic anvil. And at the center of it all, the arrogant, zealot god who believed he was a savior. He looked at Vados and Marcarita, and they met his gaze, their expressions grim but resolute. They had fought through the whispers of their own hearts to get here. This was just a battle. Let's get to work, Goku said, as the first wave of the silent army crashed upon their platform. The heart of nothingness was about to learn the sound of a true battle cry. Chapter 8, The Dawn of Zenith. The battle began not with a clash of energy, but with a wave of absolute silence. The first rank of Nullsworn, a tide of corrupted warriors from 100 different species, crashed onto the central platform. They did not roar or scream, their assault was a terrifying, soundless flood of motion, their only goal to overwhelm and extinguish the 3 points of light that dared to exist in this realm of entropy. Goku, Vados, and Marcarita did not retreat. They became the eye of the storm. The horde is a distraction. Goku's voice was a calm anchor in the silent chaos, a telepathic thought shared between the three of them. Kalos wants to bog us down, study our tactics. Vados, Marcarita, you handle the welcoming committee. I'm going to talk to the man in charge. A pleasure, Vados replied, a fierce smile touching her lips. Try to leave some for me, Marcarita added, her staff already glowing with a menacing pink light. Goku vanished. He didn't use instant transmission or a spatial fold. He simply stepped out of the conventional flow of time for a fraction of a second, the horde of Nullsworn passing through the space he had just occupied like water flowing around a stone. He reappeared directly in front of Lord Kalos, the two corrupted angels, and the colossal cosmic anvil. Kalos's arrogant smile tightened, a flicker of surprise in his zealous eyes. The two fallen angels reacted instantly, their black halos flaring as they moved to intercept. But behind Goku, the real storm broke. Vados and Marcarita unleashed the full, terrifying power of their coordinated angelic abilities. Vados swept her staff in a grand arc, and a shimmering wall of temporal distortion erupted around their half of the platform. The first 1,000 Nullsworn to cross the barrier were frozen in time, their silent charge transformed into a grotesque statue garden. Marcarita aimed her staff at the sky, and a dozen miniature black holes materialized, not to destroy, but to control. They spun in a perfect vortex, their immense gravitational pull capturing the next wave of leaping Nullsworn, sucking them into a swirling, inescapable gyre. They fought not with brute force, but with the elegant, overwhelming precision of cosmic surgeons. One angel controlled time, the other space. Nullsworn that managed to slip past the temporal wall were immediately crushed by localized gravity wells. Creatures that tried to flank were caught in spatial loops, forced to repeat the same 3 steps for eternity. It was not a battle, it was a culling, a display of such effortless, absolute power that it was almost contemptuous. Meanwhile, Goku faced his own opponents. The two fallen angels attacked in perfect unison. One, a male with short-cropped silver hair, thrust a spear of solidified darkness at Goku's heart. The other, a female with long, flowing black hair, slashed at his neck with a blade of pure void energy. Goku didn't dodge. He stood his ground, raising his hands. He caught the spear in his right palm and the blade in his left. The dark energy, designed to unravel and erase, sizzled against his skin but could not find purchase. His zenith form was a state of perfect internal harmony, there were no cracks in his being for the entropy to seep into. You threw away your grace, Goku said, his voice low and sorrowful as he looked into their empty eyes. For him. For this. He clenched his fists. The spear of darkness and the blade of void shattered, not with an explosion, but by being fundamentally reordered. Their energy, a force of anti-existence, was forcibly converted into pure, harmless light, which dissipated in a soft, gentle flash. The fallen angels stared at their empty hands in shock. They had poured their very essence into that attack, and he had unmade it with a thought. Goku moved. He flowed between them, not as a fighter, but as a phantom. He placed one hand on the back of each of their necks. A gentle, warm pulse of his zenith energy flowed into them. It wasn't an attack. It was a gift. A spark of the pure, creative force they had abandoned. The two corrupted angels convulsed. The gray of their skin warred with a returning, healthy blue. Their black, fractured halos flickered, sparks of their original white light trying to reignite. They were being offered a path back, a taste of the grace they had lost. Kalis watched, his expression shifting from arrogance to fury. Do not be swayed by his tricks. He offers you a return to slavery. I offer you godhood. His words broke the spell. The two fallen angels screamed, not in pain, but in rage, and forcibly expelled Goku's energy. The light in their halos died completely, their commitment to the void now absolute. They turned on Goku with a renewed, desperate ferocity. But Goku was already past them. His target was Kalis. The self-proclaimed savior god sneered and raised a hand, a sphere of crackling golden energy forming in his palm. You are persistent, mortal. I will grant you that. But your journey ends here. He hurled the sphere, and it detonated with the force of a supernova. Goku met it with an open palm. The explosion washed over him, parting around his body as if he were a stone in a river. When the light cleared, he hadn't moved an inch. Your power is borrowed, Kalis, Goku said, taking a calm step forward. It's loud. It's flashy. But it has no foundation. No center. Kalis's face contorted in a snarl. He unleashed a torrent of attacks, beams of divine judgment, blades of celestial fire, waves of concussive force. It was a light show of apocalyptic proportions. Goku walked through it. He didn't deflect the attacks. He simply endured them. They splashed against his zenith form and dissipated, like waves against a mountain. With every step he took, Kalis's attacks grew more frantic, more desperate. The god's arrogance was cracking, revealing the raw, terrified fear beneath. Why won't you fall? Kalis shrieked, finally backing away. I am a god. You are just a mortal. An ape. Goku stopped, now only a few feet from him. That's your mistake, he said, his voice a quiet rumble. You see being immortal as a weakness. But we get to learn. We get to grow. We get to change. You are just the same zealot you were 1,000,000 years ago. You haven't learned a thing. With a final, desperate act, Kalis turned and fired a massive beam of energy not at Goku, but at the cosmic anvil behind him. If I cannot have my new world, then no one will have one at all. I will trigger the anvil. I will unleash the null completely. The beam struck the anvil. The colossal machine whined, its sickly purple conduits flaring violently. The fabric of the sepulchre began to groan, and the central platform shuddered. The sphere of absolute blackness at the heart of the dimension, the sealed core of the null itself, began to pulse, its cage failing. But Kalis had miscalculated. The anvil was not a simple switch. By overloading it, he hadn't triggered a controlled release, he had broken it. The focused beam it was meant to create was gone, replaced by an unstable, rupturing vortex. The gateway to the null was tearing open, but it was uncontrolled. Wild. A fissure of pure, unadulterated nothingness tore open in the space between Kalis and the anvil. It was not black. It was a hole inside itself. The consciousness of the null, ancient and hungry, tasted freedom. Kalis stared in horror. This was not part of his plan. He was supposed to control it, to be its master. A tendril of the void, a sliver of non-existence, lashed out from the fissure and touched his leg. Kalis screamed. It was a high, thin, terrified sound. His ornate golden boot, his leg, his very being up to his hip simply, ceased to be. There was no blood, no gore. It was just gone, erased from existence as if it had never been. He fell, scrabbling away from the growing tear in reality, his face a mask of pure terror. The two fallen angels, seeing their master fall and the abomination he had unleashed, hesitated for a single, fatal moment. A second tendril of the void lashed out and enveloped them. They vanished without a sound. The null was free. And it was hungry. The humming from the legions of null-sworn stopped. Their purpose fulfilled, their master gone, they simply crumbled into grey dust, their silent army returning to the nothingness from which it was animated. Vados and Marcarita rushed to Goku's side, the platform now clear. They looked at the weeping, broken Kalis, then at the growing, terrifying rift in space. Goku, the entire dimension is collapsing. Vados yelled, her voice tight with alarm. The null's prison is broken. The tear in reality was expanding rapidly, the absolute nothingness beginning to consume the black platforms, the unspace, everything. Soon it would breach the membrane into the ordered multiverse, and Zeno's terrible, final solution would become inevitable. Punching it wouldn't work. A Kamehameha would be like throwing a cup of water into a volcano. A Hakai would be a meaningless gesture. How do you destroy nothing? How do you kill the concept of an ending? Goku looked at the expanding void. He looked at the trembling, broken god who had caused it all. He looked at Vados and Marcarita, at the two beings who had rebuilt him, who had become his entire universe. And in that instant, 1,000 years of meditation, of training, of philosophical debate, coalesced into a single, insane, brilliant idea. You don't destroy nothing. You don't fight it. You give it something to be. Get ready to pour every last drop of your energy into me, he said, his voice deadly calm. Everything you have. Don't hold back. Goku, what are you going to do? Marcarita asked, her eyes wide with fear. He turned to them, and for the first time in 1,000 years, he gave them his old, full-throated, confident grin. It was a beautiful, terrifying sight. Whis taught me about destruction. You taught me about creation. I'm about to show you what happens when a scion decides to do both at the same time. He turned to face the expanding void, the ultimate entropy. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, his zenith form reaching a new level of internal density. He was no longer a star. He was becoming a singularity. He wasn't gathering energy for an attack. He was gathering the concepts that defined him. The scion drive to shatter limits. The love for his new family. The pain of his betrayal. The peace of his enlightenment. The raw, indomitable will to exist. Vados and Marcarita placed their hands on his back, and the full, boundless power of two angels flowed into him. It was a torrent of pure, creative energy, the stuff that stars were made of. Goku did not shout. He did not power up. He opened his eyes, the stellar light within them now a blazing, white-hot supernova. He held his hands out toward the encroaching void. And he performed the ultimate act of heresy. The ultimate act of creation. He didn't unleash a beam. He unleashed an idea. A concept. A Genesis bomb. A wave of energy, pure white and shimmering with every color imaginable, pulsed from him. It was not destructive. It was generative. It did not push back against the null, it filled it. It was a wave of pure, complex information. The laws of physics. The spark of life. The concept of time. The potential for love. The beauty of loss. He was giving the nothingness, everything. The null, a being of pure, simple entropy, was overwhelmed. It had no defense against an infusion of infinite complexity. It was like trying to drown an ocean with a single drop of water. The wave of Genesis did not destroy the null. It gave it a new purpose. It transformed the sentient, hungry void into the foundational canvas for something new. The tear in reality stopped expanding. The violent, world-eating blackness stabilized, and within its depths, a single point of light appeared. Then another. And another. A new Big Bang. A new multiverse, born from the ashes of the old one's greatest threat. The effort was titanic. It was costing Goku everything. His body flickered, threatening to discorporate. But Vados and Marcarita held him together, their energy, their love, the anchor that kept him tethered to existence. When it was over, the silent sepulchre was gone. The cosmic anvil was gone. The tear in reality was gone. In its place, humming with the vibrant, chaotic energy of new creation, was a nascent, infant multiverse. Goku collapsed, his zenith form receding, his body exhausted but whole. Vados and Marcarita caught him, holding him up between them. They stood there, the three of them, at the dawn of a new creation. In the world of the gods, the effect was instantaneous. The creeping dread, the thinning of reality, the whispers of the void, all vanished. The Grand Priest, watching from his palace, let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding for eons. The gods, from Beerus to Belmod, felt a weight lift from the cosmos, though none understood why. On Beerus's planet, Whis stood looking at the sky, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. He had felt it. A power, a technique, an idea so profound it had shaken the foundations of his own being. He knew who it was. And he knew he was unworthy to even speak his name. Back at the edge of existence, Goku, supported by his two angels, looked at their handiwork. The Grand Priest appeared before them, his expression one of pure, unadulterated awe. He looked from the newborn multiverse to the exhausted but triumphant trio. He bowed his head. It was not the formal bow of a superior, but the deep, reverent bow of one who has witnessed a true miracle. "You have saved everything," he whispered. "The great pact is fulfilled. The cosmic balance is restored. Son Goku, ask for anything. A universe to rule. The power of a god of destruction. The rank of an angel. Anything. It is yours." Goku took a deep, shuddering breath, leaning on Vados and Marcarita. He looked at the Grand Priest, his eyes clear and calm. "We want only one thing," Goku said, his voice quiet but firm. He looked at Vados, at Marcarita, at the two beings who were his everything. He saw his own feelings reflected in their eyes. They had been prisoners of fate, of duty, of betrayal. Now, they were free. "Leave us alone," he finished. The Grand Priest nodded slowly, a deep understanding in his eyes. He owed them that, and so much more. "As you wish." With a final, respectful bow, he vanished. Goku, Vados, and Marcarita stood there for a long moment, the only living beings at the edge of their own private creation. They were not gods, not mortals, not angels. They were something new, something more. They were a power unto themselves, bound not by law or duty, but by a love forged in 1,000 years of shared eternity. They picked a planet at random, a quiet, young world in an uncatalogued corner of Universe 7. It had green continents, blue oceans, and two suns that set in a blaze of violet and gold. The story ends with the three of them sitting on a grassy cliff, watching the twin sunset. Vados rested her head on Goku's right shoulder, Marcarita on his left. No one spoke. There was nothing that needed to be said. He had been betrayed. He had been caged. He had been broken. But in the end, he had found something far greater than strength or revenge. He had found freedom. He had found family. He had found peace. In the sky above their new home, a new star, one they had willed into being just for the view, flared to life, a silent testament to their new beginning. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.